Naruto Uzumaki had always felt the sting of the village's rejection. A child, burdened with the title of Demon Fox, due to the monstrous creature sealed within him. Naruto's life was anything but normal. He had been cursed by fate, forced to endure a life of solitude, scorn, and relentless loneliness. The villagers, those who saw him only as the vessel for the nine-tails fox, avoided him, mocked him, and treated him like an outcast. Yet, Naruto never wavered in his determination to become Hokage, believing that one day, the villagers would respect him, see him for who he truly was, and not for the curse of the fox. But that dream had felt impossibly far when a mob, one of the many that had gathered against him throughout his life, descended upon him. The street was crowded, the sound of footsteps reverberating against the stone road, the chants of hatred rising from the crowd. Naruto's heart raced as he backed up against a wall, hands trembling, ready for the inevitable. He had seen it before, but never this intense. The hate-filled faces, the angry shouts, they all blurred into a cacophony of voices, demanding his punishment, his exile, or worse, his death. Naruto had always been good at running. He had learned early on that his survival depended on quick reflexes and the ability to escape when things got bad. Today, however, something inside him had shifted. The mob's jeers, their hateful glares, the stones thrown in his direction, all of it had built up to a point where Naruto could no longer just run. His fists clenched. The same power that had been forced upon him his entire life, the nine tails, had always been an anchor, a burden. He had learned to control it, but it was never truly his to command. It was a wild beast, its chakra untamable, its will ironclad. But what if there was more to his strength than the fox? What if something else stirred within him, just waiting to break free? The thought was fleeting, but intense. One of the villagers hurled a large stone at him. It struck his shoulder, and Naruto stumbled back. But he caught himself, his eyes burning with an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Anger. A deep, primal rage surged through him. And for the first time, he could feel something more than the fox's power. It was an unfamiliar sensation, like the pulse of a great, unstoppable force. It began to surge from deep within him, igniting his veins, giving him a clarity he had never known. The world around him seemed to slow as his body began to change. His muscles rippled under his skin, and his posture straightened. His heart thudded in his chest, but now it sounded like the roar of thunder, not the fearful flutter of a child. The air around him seemed to thicken, charged with an electric tension that hummed in the silence before the storm. He looked down at his hands, feeling the raw, unrestrained power pulsing within them. Without thinking, he raised one hand, and in a burst of raw energy, he smashed the ground before him. The earth cracked, sending fissures spreading through the street like a shockwave. The mob paused, stunned, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Naruto's breath came in ragged gasps, but his mind was clearer than ever. He had always relied on his speed, on his ability to think quickly and dodge. But now, it wasn't about running. It was about standing his ground. A new power had awakened within him, something far greater than anything he had ever felt. His body was now a vessel for something far older, far stronger. The raw, unrefined strength of his will was now manifesting in a way he couldn't control but instinctively understood. With a roar, he leapt forward, propelled by an explosive surge of power. His fists tore through the air with the force of a wrecking ball, and each punch landed with the impact of a bomb. The villagers who had been closest to him were sent flying backward, their bodies crashing into nearby buildings and walls with bone-shattering force. They screamed in terror, realizing too late that they had awakened something they could not possibly comprehend. Naruto's eyes were alight with fury, but it wasn't the usual rage that consumed him. No, this was something deeper. It was the strength of a man who had been beaten down his whole life, only to rise up with the might of a titan. His heart pounded in his chest. But now it was no longer the pulse of fear. It was the heartbeat of a warrior. He grinned, the sensation of power intoxicating him. He had always been underestimated, but no more. This wasn't just the nine tails chakra. This was something else. Something primal. The villagers, though stunned, began to regroup, rallying to the side. They had come for his blood, and now they were desperate to see him fall. But Naruto wasn't the same boy anymore. He was more than just the vessel for the Nine Tails. He was the embodiment of raw power, a force of nature that could not be stopped. His eyes shifted, narrowing with focus as he eyed the next wave of attackers. He could see them clearly now, each one filled with fear and determination, their weapons shaking in their hands. But Naruto didn't hesitate. He charged, faster than any of them could react. His right fist collided with one of the attackers, sending him flying through the air and crashing into a nearby building. The walls cracked and crumbled under the force of his blow. Another came at him from the side, but Naruto's left hand shot out in a blur, catching the man by the throat. He lifted him off the ground with ease, the man kicking and gasping for breath as Naruto's grip tightened. There was no mercy in his eyes, only the cold, unwavering focus of someone who had finally unlocked the full potential of their being. "You want to hurt me?" Naruto growled, his voice rough and dangerous. "I'll show you what real power is." With a single motion, he tossed the man aside, sending him crashing into the dirt. The mob was in disarray now, no longer sure how to deal with the overwhelming force standing before them. Their leader, a burly man with a large axe, stepped forward, determined to put an end to Naruto's rampage. But Naruto was faster. His body moved like a blur, closing the distance between them in an instant. The axe wielder swung his weapon, but Naruto caught the handle mid-swing and yanked it from his grip with terrifying ease. With one powerful swing, Naruto slammed the butt of the axe into the man's stomach, sending him sprawling backward, gasping for air. The crowd fell silent, their fear palpable. Naruto stood in the center, breathing heavily, his fists clenched, his body crackling with energy. The ground around him was cracked and broken, a testament to the raw force he had unleashed. As he stood there, the world seemed to slow again. It was like the very air had changed, the tension in the atmosphere growing thicker. And then, something even stranger began to happen. Naruto felt a strange, familiar presence within him. A presence that was not the Nine Tails, but something else. It was an energy he couldn't fully understand, but he could feel its vastness, its ancient power. It was a power that had been awakened when he needed it most. A force that had lain dormant for years, waiting for the right moment. This was the power of Garp. The power of a man who could topple mountains with a single punch. A power that had now merged with Naruto's very being. Naruto's senses sharpened. His every muscle felt like it could crush boulders. His mind clearer than it had ever been. His body pulsed with an energy that he had no name for. A force that could break anything in its path. But despite the overwhelming power coursing through him, there was a strange peace in his heart. This wasn't about anger anymore. This wasn't about revenge. It was about standing tall, no matter the odds. And for the first time, Naruto felt that he wasn't just a tool for vengeance or a symbol of fear. He was something greater. He was a force of nature. And no one could stop him. Naruto stood in the center of the chaos, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with each labored breath. The mob had scattered, their once confident movements replaced by hesitation and fear. They had seen something today, something that none of them could ever have imagined. They had witnessed a power that surpassed anything they had ever encountered. A power that was not just the Nine Tails, but something far greater. For a moment, Naruto's vision blurred, his senses heightened beyond what he had ever known. His body thrummed with an intensity that was both alien and familiar. A sensation that reminded him of his past struggles, the loneliness, the rejection, the pain. But now, there was something different. There was strength, undeniable and absolute. His hands clenched into fists once again, not out of anger, but out of the sheer will to understand this newfound power. What was it? Where had it come from? He had always relied on his speed, his cunning, and his ability to think on his feet. But this was something else. This was not his own power. It was the power of something ancient, something unstoppable. A voice echoed in the back of his mind, not the voice of Kurama, the Nine Tails, but something older, something that resonated with the very fabric of his being. You are not just the Nine Tails vessel. You're something more. Naruto closed his eyes, feeling the presence inside him. A presence that seemed to rise from the very core of his soul. It was like the essence of a warrior. The power of a battle-hardened fighter. A strength that had been forged in the fires of countless struggles. It was the power of Garp, the legendary hero of the One Piece world. And it was inside him now. As the villagers began to regroup, some recovering from the shock, others still trembling in fear, Naruto could sense their doubt. They were afraid. But they were also confused. They didn't know what to make of him anymore. And for the first time in his life, Naruto felt a strange satisfaction from their fear. Not because he enjoyed seeing them scared, but because he knew, deep down, that he had never been more in control of his own fate. He turned to face the remaining villagers, his eyes no longer filled with the uncertainty and desperation that had once plagued him. Now, they burned with purpose, with clarity. He had always dreamed of becoming Hokage, but now it wasn't just about the title or the recognition. It was about standing tall in the face of his past, his enemies, and his fears. It was about showing everyone, including himself, that he was not the weak, helpless child they had always seen him as. The leader of the mob, the man who had thrown the first stone, stepped forward once again. His eyes were filled with both defiance and fear. But there was no turning back now. You're not human, he shouted, his voice shaking but resolute. Naruto's lip curled into a grin, his teeth sharp and unsettling. What does it matter? He muttered. I'm no demon. I'm not a monster. His voice grew louder, stronger. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. And I'm done running. The man hesitated, clearly unsure how to proceed. The others behind him were still frozen, the tension in the air thick with uncertainty. It was clear that they had underestimated him. They had thought he was just a boy. Just a kid with the 9 tails sealed inside him. But Naruto was no longer that boy. Not today. Without warning, Naruto moved. He moved faster than any of them could comprehend. His body was a blur as he closed the distance in an instant. The ground cracked beneath his feet as he planted a single, powerful punch into the ground, sending a shockwave through the entire street. The earth trembled under the force of the blow, and the villagers staggered back, their eyes wide with disbelief. The leader of the mob barely had time to react. Before he could even raise his hand to defend himself, Naruto was on him, his fist landing with a thundering crash against the man's chest. The impact sent him flying backward, crashing into the side of a building. Dust and debris filled the air as the leader crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The remaining villagers were paralyzed, watching in awe and terror. They had never seen anything like this before. The power Naruto had just displayed was on a completely different level. It wasn't just the raw physical force. They could feel it, the way the air seemed to bend and shift around him. It was the power of a man who had transcended his limits. Naruto took a step forward, his eyes scanning the terrified crowd. His gaze was unrelenting, his aura commanding. He could feel the weight of their fear pressing against him. But it didn't faze him. He had been afraid his entire life. And now it was his turn to instill that fear in others. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. If you think you can break me, think again. Naruto's voice rang out, strong and clear. I don't need to prove myself to you, or anyone else. But know this. If you try to hurt me again, you won't like the outcome. The remaining villagers exchanged nervous glances. And one by one, they began to back away, fear flooding their senses. Naruto's power was undeniable, and they could see that there was no stopping him now. They had come to fight a child, but they were leaving, running from a force of nature. As they disappeared into the streets, Naruto stood there for a moment, allowing the silence to settle over him. His chest heaved, his body still radiating with the overwhelming power he had tapped into. The storm had passed, but the aftermath lingered. He was no longer the outcast, the weak, hopeless child. He was something greater, something the world had never seen before. The realization hit him like a wave, but instead of overwhelming him, it empowered him. He was no longer defined by the fox inside him. He was more. He was unstoppable. But as the villagers retreated, Naruto's thoughts turned inward. He had always carried the burden of being the host of the 9 tails. But now he was carrying something else, a legacy, a power. The very essence of a man who had once stood as the greatest warrior in his world. He didn't fully understand it yet. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that he was no longer bound by his past. He had unlocked something new. And he would make sure the world knew it. His steps were slow at first. But with each passing second, he began to walk with more confidence. There was still so much to learn. So much to understand. But one thing was clear. Naruto Uzumaki was no longer the underdog. He had become something greater. And now it was time for him to show the world what that meant. Naruto's footsteps echoed down the deserted street as he walked slowly. His mind racing. The weight of what had just happened hadn't fully sunk in. He had always dreamed of being stronger. Of proving his worth to the world. But now, he had become something entirely different. Something that no one in the village, no one in the world, could ever have predicted. He wasn't just a Jinchuriki anymore. He was something more. His fists still clenched at his sides. His body thrumming with raw, untapped power. The power of Garp. The power of a man who could topple mountains with a single punch. The power of someone who had spent their life battling against impossible odds and came out victorious every time. That strength was now his. Coursing through his veins. Naruto paused. Standing in the middle of the street. And looked up at the sky. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the village. The cool evening air washed over him. But it did little to calm the fire that had ignited inside him. He could feel the energy inside him, swirling, waiting to be unleashed. He wasn't sure how long this power would last, or how much more it could grow. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. He smiled, his lips curling into a grin. This is just the beginning, he muttered to himself. The words carrying an intensity that made the air around him vibrate. But even as the power surged within him, a part of Naruto's mind began to shift. It was not just the physical strength that had changed. His perception of everything had altered. The way he viewed the village, the people who had once turned their backs on him, the very idea of being Hokage. It was all different now. He wasn't just going to become Hokage to prove his worth. He was going to take control. He was going to make them all recognize him. Not as the boy they had always feared, but as a force of nature. A protector. The voice of reason inside his mind spoke up, reminding him of the dangers of letting power consume him. Don't lose yourself in all of this, Naruto. You're stronger now. But you're not invincible. Don't let the power change you. Naruto shook his head, forcing the voice away. It wasn't fear that had guided him to this point, it was willpower. He had already made up his mind. He wouldn't be anyone's tool anymore. He wasn't just going to fight for acceptance. He was going to fight for change. For himself. As he walked through the village, the fear and awe in the eyes of those who had witnessed his power weighed heavily on him. People had started to whisper. They didn't know how to react. Some were still fearful, while others were hesitant, unsure of what to make of him. The power he had just displayed wasn't something they had ever seen before. And it unsettled them. And it unsettled him too. In a way, Naruto wasn't sure if he could fully control the strength coursing through his body. It was like a storm, unpredictable and wild. But it was his storm now. He clenched his fists again, the power inside him reacting to his emotions. Naruto, the familiar voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw a figure approach. It was none other than Sasuke Uchiha, his longtime rival and friend. Despite the tense atmosphere, Sasuke walked toward him, his expression unreadable but his posture straight and calm. Looks like you've caused a bit of a stir, Sasuke said dryly, his voice carrying the usual aloof tone, though Naruto could detect a hint of curiosity beneath it. Naruto's grin widened as he looked Sasuke up and down. You could say that. What? You didn't hear the commotion? He teased, a hint of arrogance creeping into his voice. Sasuke's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed Naruto more carefully, his gaze flicking to the crumbled earth, the shattered street, the damage that Naruto's outburst had left behind. There was no hiding it. Whatever Naruto had done, it was powerful. And Sasuke knew better than to underestimate that power. I heard, Sasuke replied, his gaze unwavering. But I was curious. You've always had a knack for getting yourself into trouble. But this. He paused, his voice colder now. What the hell happened to you? Naruto could feel the shift in the air between them. That familiar tension. Sasuke wasn't scared of him. Not in the way the villagers were. But there was something else in his eyes. Something like challenge. Sasuke always had that edge to him. That quiet defiance. Even now. But this time, Naruto could sense it. There was something different about Sasuke too. His eyes weren't just filled with rivalry. They were filled with something deeper. Respect. Perhaps. Something changed, Naruto said. His voice becoming quieter. He turned his gaze away, looking at the damage he had caused. It was hard to put into words. He had always been a fighter. Always pushed himself to be stronger. But now, it felt like his body had become a weapon, a force of nature that had been unleashed. He wasn't sure if he could control it. But he didn't care. For the first time, it felt like he had the power to change everything. Sasuke studied him for a moment, his eyes narrowing, before he spoke again. You're stronger now. I can see that. But don't let it go to your head. Naruto. This isn't a game. You're not the only one who's trained to get stronger. We both know that. Naruto smirked. A playful glint in his eyes. Yeah. I know. But for once, maybe you can just admit it. I'm stronger than you now. Sasuke's eyes flashed with a brief spark of annoyance. But instead of lashing out, he simply tilted his head. Don't get too cocky. You got a long way to go. Naruto laughed. Loud and carefree. I'm not worried. Sasuke. For once, I'm not worried about anything. I know my strength now. And that's all that matters. Sasuke remained silent for a moment before he finally spoke again. You've changed. I'll give you that. But remember, strength is meaningless if you don't know what to do with it. Naruto's expression softened, the weight of Sasuke's words sinking in. I know. But I think I've got a good idea. The two of them stood there for a moment, the silence between them stretching on, before Naruto finally broke it with a sharp, excited breath. You want to test me, Sasuke? He asked, the challenge clear in his voice. Sasuke's lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk appearing on his face. Maybe later, he said, his tone suggesting he wasn't quite ready to fight. But not today. Naruto's grin widened. Suit yourself. But just know, I'm not going to hold back anymore. Sasuke merely nodded, his expression unreadable, before he turned and began to walk away. Naruto watched him go, a mix of emotions swirling within him. There was rivalry. Sure. But there was also something more. Respect. The recognition that they had both changed. That they were no longer just the children who had fought side by side in the academy. They were something more now. Naruto felt the weight of the future on his shoulders. He wasn't sure what lay ahead, but he knew that he wasn't going to face it alone. And he wasn't going to face it as a boy anymore. He had awakened to a power that had been inside him all along. A power that would change the course of his life. With one last glance at Sasuke, Naruto turned and headed toward the Hokage's office. There was still a long road ahead of him. But with his newfound strength, nothing was going to stop him. Not anymore. Naruto walked through the village with a new sense of purpose. The path ahead felt different now. He was no longer the underdog struggling to be acknowledged. He had the power to change things. To reshape his destiny. Every step he took felt heavier with the realization that the future was now in his hands. As the villagers stared at him, some with awe, others with fear, he could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. But Naruto didn't mind. In fact, he welcomed it. He had spent his entire life craving acknowledgement, chasing after the recognition of others, only to be dismissed and rejected. Now, the world had no choice but to see him. They couldn't ignore him anymore. He passed by familiar faces, but they no longer gave him the same nervous looks they once had. There was a new wariness in their eyes, something akin to fear, but also respect. As he made his way through the streets, Naruto noticed how the people seemed to part before him. The usual murmurs and whispers followed him, but they were different now. More hesitant. More uncertain. Naruto's thoughts drifted to the Hokage's office. He could almost feel the familiar pressure of the title weighing on his shoulders. But he knew this was the first step towards something greater. Being Hokage wasn't just about power. It was about being the protector of the village. He had always dreamt of this position. But now, it wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a goal that he could reach. It was his destiny. As Naruto approached the Hokage's office, the guards at the entrance gave him a brief, wary glance before stepping aside. They didn't question him. They couldn't afford to. He was no longer the boy who begged for attention. He was someone they had to respect. Inside the office, the familiar faces of the village's leaders awaited him. The Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, sat at his desk, his eyes warm but sharp as always. Around him were the elders of the village, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and other trusted advisors. They all looked at Naruto with a mixture of curiosity and caution, no doubt still processing the events that had unfolded earlier. "Naruto," Sarutobi began, his voice calm yet with an undercurrent of concern. "We need to talk." Naruto's heart skipped a beat. He had been waiting for this moment. But now that it was here, he felt the weight of his actions settling over him. The Hokage's office was never a place for casual conversation. It was where the village's future was decided. "I know," Naruto said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "I know I've made a mess. But you saw what happened out there. I'm not the same anymore." Sarutobi's gaze softened slightly, but his tone remained serious. "I can see that," he said. "But with great power comes great responsibility. Naruto, you've always been headstrong. But now you have the power to change the course of this village. You need to understand the consequences of your actions." Naruto nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I understand," he said, though his thoughts were already racing ahead. "But I won't apologize for what happened today. I didn't ask for this power. But I've got it now. I'm not going to hide it." Tsunade, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Naruto, we all understand that you've grown stronger. But power like that, it's not just about strength. It's about control. If you can't control it, it will consume you." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "I'm not going to let it control me," he said firmly. "I've been controlled all my life. By the villagers. By the Hokage. By everyone. I won't let that happen again." There was a silence in the room as Naruto's words hung in the air. Sarutobi leaned back in his chair, studying Naruto with a thoughtful expression. "I see," he said slowly. "You're not the boy you once were. But remember this, Naruto. You are still a part of this village. And we all have a duty to protect it. Your power, while immense, must be used for the greater good. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore." Naruto's fist clenched at his side. But he held his tongue. He understood what Sarutobi was saying, but the weight of his newfound strength was overwhelming. He wasn't just a protector of the village now. He was a force that could change the world. And for the first time, it felt like the village was depending on him, not the other way around. "I'll do whatever it takes," Naruto said, his voice unwavering. "I won't let the village down." Sarutobi looked at him, a proud yet cautious gleam in his eyes. "Good. But remember, you don't have to do it alone. You have allies, friends, and even your rivals can be a source of strength." Naruto's gaze flickered to Sasuke, who stood a little distance away, watching silently. The rivalry between them had always been fierce. But now, it felt like something more. It was mutual respect, born from the realization that they had both changed. That they were both no longer just children playing games. "I know," Naruto said, his tone softer this time. "I'm not alone anymore." Tsunade, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, smiled. "That's the spirit, Naruto. Just remember, with the strength you have now, you're no longer just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone. Don't forget that." Naruto nodded, his mind made up. He wasn't just going to be the protector of the village. He was going to be the protector of everything. He was going to use this power to reshape the world, to break the cycles of hatred and fear. And he would do it on his terms. As the meeting concluded, Naruto left the Hokage's office with a new sense of clarity. He wasn't the same boy who had walked into the village all those years ago. He wasn't just a Jinchuriki, a vessel for the Nine Tails. He was Naruto Uzumaki, a man with the strength to change the world. As he walked through the streets of Konoha, the villagers no longer feared him in the way they once had. They respected him, watched him with awe, and whispered of the power he had displayed. But Naruto wasn't concerned with their whispers. He wasn't concerned with their expectations. He had his own path now. He had his own destiny. His mind wandered to his next steps. There was still so much he had to learn. So much he had to prove. But there was one thing he knew for certain. He wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. The future was his to shape. And with the power he had awakened, there was nothing that could stand in his way. As Naruto made his way through the village, the lingering whispers of the villagers seemed to follow him. But they were no longer filled with scorn or mockery. Now, they were filled with something different: fear, respect, awe. They watched him, some with hesitation, others with curiosity. But none dared to challenge him. Naruto wasn't just the loud, irritating kid from the orphanage anymore. He wasn't the unpredictable, uncontrollable force of chaos that had once been dismissed and rejected. He had become someone else entirely. Someone powerful. Someone that they couldn't ignore. As Naruto walked down the familiar streets of Konoha, the air around him seemed to hum with the weight of what had happened. It was as though the entire village was holding its breath, waiting for the next move from the boy who had just become a man. It was a strange feeling. He had always been the outsider, always the one who had to fight for every ounce of respect, every scrap of acknowledgement. But now, they were the ones watching him. He stopped for a moment, standing at the edge of the village square, taking in the scene before him. Children were playing in the distance. A few shopkeepers were calling out to potential customers, and the usual bustle of the village continued as if nothing had happened. But Naruto knew better. The village had changed. And so had he. It wasn't just the power that had shifted inside him. It was everything. His perspective had changed. The way he viewed the villagers, the Hokage, even Sasuke. Everything had been transformed. He was no longer just the boy who dreamed of being Hokage for the sake of recognition. No. Now he understood the true meaning of the title. Hokage wasn't just about power, it was about responsibility. And he wasn't going to wear that title lightly. Naruto continued his walk, heading toward the training grounds just outside the village. He had been there countless times before, training alone, pushing himself to the limits in an attempt to prove his worth. But now, with the power of Garp coursing through him, his training would have to change. It was no longer about mastering a technique. It was about control, understanding the limits of his strength and knowing when to hold back. As he arrived at the clearing, Naruto immediately began to stretch, his muscles eager to move, to feel the rush of power once more. His mind raced as he recalled the events of the day. The villagers, Sasuke, the Hokage, all of them had seen what he was capable of now. They had seen a glimpse of the beast that he had become. But now, it was time to hone that power, to ensure that it didn't consume him. He stood still for a moment, allowing the silence of the clearing to wash over him. The wind rustled through the trees, and the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground. He closed his eyes, focusing inward. He could feel the raw energy within him, the strength, the speed, the power. But there was also something else, a sense of control, a whisper that told him to hold back, to be patient. Naruto exhaled slowly, releasing the tension in his body. He had always been reckless, always willing to charge headfirst into battle without thinking of the consequences. But now, with this power, he had to be smarter. He had to learn how to wield it without letting it dominate him. He opened his eyes and took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the horizon. With a single step, he charged forward, the ground beneath him cracking as his speed shattered the earth. The air around him whipped violently, and for a split second, it felt as though the world itself had bent to his will. He was faster, stronger, more capable than he had ever been. But just as quickly, he halted, his foot skidding to a stop. The wind stilled around him. He had done it. In that moment, he had tapped into the power he had been gifted. But it was different now. It wasn't just about overwhelming his opponents with brute force. It was about knowing when to strike, when to hold back, and most importantly, when to stop. Naruto took a few steps back, his breathing steady as he surveyed the damage he had caused to the ground. The crater he had left in his wake was immense, a testament to the sheer force of his punch. He grinned, but there was no arrogance in it. There was no pride. Just a quiet understanding that the power he now wielded was both a blessing and a curse. He couldn't afford to let it consume him. as it had consumed so many others before him. As he began to practice more controlled strikes, his thoughts turned to Sasuke. Their rivalry had always been intense. But now, it felt different. He wasn't sure if it was the power, or if it was the fact that Sasuke was one of the few who could keep up with him. But Naruto knew one thing for sure: Sasuke wasn't going to back down. And that was exactly what Naruto needed. A challenge. Someone who wouldn't let him get complacent. He smiled to himself as he punched the air once more, the sound of his fist cutting through the wind like thunder. There was a bond between him and Sasuke that went beyond rivalry. It was a bond forged through shared pain, shared dreams, and now, shared power. Sasuke might not admit it, but Naruto could feel it. They were on the same path, heading toward the same goal. It was only a matter of time before they both stood at the top, side by side. After an hour of intense training, Naruto collapsed onto the ground, his muscles sore but satisfied. He had learned something important today. Power was nothing without discipline. It wasn't enough to be strong. He had to be smart, calculated. If he didn't master this power, it would master him. Just as he was catching his breath, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to find Sasuke standing at the edge of the clearing, his arms crossed, a blank expression on his face, despite the cool demeanor. Naruto could sense the tension between them. Sasuke was still sizing him up. "How's it feel?" Sasuke asked, his voice lacking any trace of surprise. He had already seen Naruto's strength firsthand, but the way he said it, Naruto knew that Sasuke was still processing the magnitude of what he had just witnessed. "It feels different," Naruto replied, sitting up and wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Like I can do anything. But also, like I have to be careful. I don't want to become like those guys who just go around wrecking everything. You know, I've got the power now, but I've got to learn how to control it." Sasuke's eyes flickered slightly. "HMPH. You've always been a mess, Naruto. But I'll give you credit, this power, it's something else. Just don't forget who you're dealing with." Naruto grinned. "Don't worry. I won't." The two stood there for a moment, a silent understanding passing between them. Sasuke had never been one to admit anything, but Naruto could feel the respect in his presence. Sasuke wasn't going to back down, and Naruto wouldn't let him. They were both in this together, whether they liked it or not. "Let's see if you can keep up," Naruto said, his grin widening. Sasuke smirked. "I'll make you regret that challenge, Naruto." And with that, the rivalry between them burned brighter than ever. Two forces, each unstoppable in their own right, yet bound together by the shared will to grow stronger, to protect what mattered. Naruto stood up, feeling the power surge within him once more. He was no longer the boy who had dreamed of being Hokage. He was something more now, and the world was about to find out just what that meant. The tension between Naruto and Sasuke hung in the air as they stood face to face in the clearing. Neither of them was willing to back down, their rivalry burning brighter than ever. Naruto, with the power of Garp flowing through him, knew that he was a force to be reckoned with. But Sasuke was not just anyone. He was a worthy rival, someone who could push him to his limits, and that was exactly what Naruto needed. Sasuke's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable as he shifted his stance, preparing for whatever challenge Naruto was about to throw his way. Despite the calm exterior, Naruto could feel the flicker of excitement beneath the surface. Sasuke was always like this, stoic, but always ready for a fight. "I don't need to hold back anymore, Sasuke," Naruto said, his voice steady but with a hint of challenge. "You're not the only one who's grown stronger." Sasuke said nothing, but the slight tilt of his head was enough to show that he was listening. He was always like that, reserved, calculating. But Naruto could feel the unspoken tension between them, the silent acknowledgement that things had changed. The power Naruto wielded now was different. It wasn't just raw strength, it was something deeper, something that could shift the very balance of their world if it was wielded recklessly. Naruto took a deep breath, his gaze focused on Sasuke. He wasn't going to just let loose like he had before. This wasn't a fight for pride or a way to prove who was stronger. This was a test of control, of restraint. of how well he could harness the immense power that surged within him. "Let's see if you can keep up," Naruto said, his grin widening as he dashed forward. In an instant, Naruto was upon Sasuke, his speed shattering the air around him. Sasuke didn't even flinch, but Naruto could see the slight shift in his eyes as he calculated the best way to respond. Sasuke was fast, but Naruto was faster now. So much faster. The ground cracked beneath his feet as he propelled himself towards Sasuke, his fist raised, ready to land a punch that would shatter any normal opponent. But Sasuke was anything but normal. With a sudden flick of his wrist, Sasuke unleashed a series of rapid strikes, each one aimed at Naruto's vital points. He was testing Naruto, trying to find an opening, to see if this newfound power had any weaknesses. Naruto countered with lightning speed, blocking and dodging Sasuke's strikes, his body moving in ways that felt completely natural, as if the power of Garp had become part of him, a new instinct that guided his every movement. For a brief moment, the two were locked in a blur of motion, a dance of fists and feet, each trying to outpace the other. The clearing seemed to shrink around them, the world itself warping under the intensity of their exchange. With each punch, with each kick, the air around them crackled with raw energy. The ground beneath their feet shattered with each strike, sending dust and debris flying in every direction. Naruto could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins. His senses were heightened, every movement calculated, every strike purposeful. Sasuke was relentless, his Sharingan flashing with deadly precision as he countered Naruto's every move. But Naruto wasn't just relying on brute force anymore. He was thinking, calculating, learning. This was no longer just about who could hit the hardest, it was about who could outsmart the other. With a swift move, Naruto ducked under Sasuke's spinning kick and lashed out with a devastating punch, aimed directly at Sasuke's chest. Sasuke barely managed to raise his arm in time to block the blow, but the force of it sent him skidding backward, his feet leaving deep gouges in the ground. Naruto didn't stop there. He was on Sasuke in an instant, moving faster than Sasuke could react, his fist a blur as it aimed for his rival's face. Sasuke barely managed to dodge, the air from Naruto's punch brushing past his cheek. He was fast, but Naruto was faster. Sasuke's Sharingan was activated, but even that couldn't keep up with the sheer speed and power Naruto was now capable of. For a moment, it seemed like Sasuke might be outmatched. But then, with a quick flick of his wrist, Sasuke summoned his Chidori, the crackling energy in his hand lighting up the air between them. The moment the Chidori formed, Naruto knew this was no longer just a spar. It was a real fight. The two rivals clashed once more, Naruto's speed meeting Sasuke's deadly precision. The air around them seemed to warp with the force of their attacks, their powers colliding in a series of explosions that sent shockwaves through the clearing. The ground beneath them cracked open, sending dirt and rocks flying as their battle raged on. Despite the overwhelming power Naruto now possessed, Sasuke held his ground. His movements were deliberate, his Sharingan tracking every motion, every feint. But Naruto could sense the strain in Sasuke's attacks. He wasn't able to keep up the same pace he once had. The power Naruto wielded now was not something that could be easily matched. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the two came to a stop. Breathing heavily, Naruto stood with a grin on his face, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. Sasuke, on the other hand, was sweating, his expression more focused than ever. But there was a glimmer of something else in his eyes. A begrudging respect. An acknowledgement that Naruto was no longer just a nuisance. Naruto wiped the sweat from his forehead, his grin never fading. "Not bad, Sasuke," he said, his voice filled with both admiration and challenge. "But you'll have to do better than that to beat me." Sasuke said nothing for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "You've gotten stronger, Naruto," he finally said, his voice cool. "But you're still the same. Reckless. Headstrong. You think you can take on the world by yourself?" Naruto's smile faded slightly as he looked at Sasuke. There was truth in Sasuke's words. He had always been reckless, charging into situations without thinking of the consequences. But now, he understood the weight of his power. He couldn't afford to be reckless anymore. Not with the strength he had now. I'm not trying to take on the world by myself, Naruto replied, his voice serious. But I won't let anyone stand in my way. Not anymore. Sasuke's gaze softened, though only slightly. We'll see, he said, turning away. This isn't over yet. Naruto watched as Sasuke disappeared into the trees, his rival's silhouette fading into the distance. There was no doubt in Naruto's mind that Sasuke would be back, just as driven as ever, just as determined to push him to his limits. And that was exactly what Naruto needed. He needed a challenge. He needed someone who wouldn't back down. Someone who could keep him grounded, keep him focused. As the dust settled around him, Naruto stood alone in the clearing, his mind racing with everything that had happened. He had proven his strength. He had shown the village what he was capable of. But now, he had to prove something to himself. The power he wielded wasn't just a tool for destruction. It was a responsibility. And he had to learn how to control it, how to use it for something greater than himself. Naruto took a deep breath, the weight of his thoughts settling over him. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. He was no longer just the boy who dreamed of becoming Hokage. He was the one who could change the world. And he was just getting started. The sun had fully set, casting the training grounds in a deep, twilight hue. The cool evening air settled over Konoha, and the gentle rustling of the leaves became a soothing contrast to the intense battle that had just transpired. The clearing where Naruto had faced Sasuke was quiet now, but the echoes of their fight lingered in the stillness. Naruto stood alone, his fists clenched at his sides as his breath slowed. He could feel the heat from his battle still pulsing in his veins, the raw power within him like a storm that could break free at any moment. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a new realization settled in. The fight had shown him just how much further he had to go. Sasuke was still a step ahead in some ways, even if his raw speed and power were unmatched. Sasuke's words echoed in Naruto's mind. You're still the same. Reckless. Headstrong. He could almost hear the judgment in Sasuke's voice. The quiet but unmistakable challenge. It was true. He had always been impulsive, charging into things without thinking. But now, with the power of Garp coursing through his body, he couldn't afford to be reckless anymore. There was too much at stake. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the village's evening meals on the breeze. Naruto's stomach growled, a reminder of the mundane, everyday needs that still tugged at him. No matter how powerful he had become, his mind began to wander, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. He wasn't just thinking about the battles ahead, but about the village, the people who had looked at him with scorn and fear for so long. Naruto had always wanted to prove himself. He had wanted to be seen, to be recognized. But now that he had the power to make everyone take notice, the questions he had been avoiding started to surface. What did he want from this power? Was he still the same boy who had yearned to be Hokage for the title, for the recognition? Or had his dreams shifted? Naruto turned his gaze to the horizon, where the first stars of the night began to twinkle in the sky. He could see the lights of Konoha in the distance, flickering like tiny beacons. They reminded him of his past, the long nights spent alone, dreaming of a better future. A future where he wouldn't have to fight for every scrap of respect, where he would be accepted for who he was. I've come so far, Naruto thought, clenching his fists. But I'm not done yet. The power within him, the strength of Garp, was only part of the equation. He needed to grow, to understand the responsibility that came with it. He wasn't going to let it consume him the way it had consumed others. There was more to being Hokage than simply being the strongest. He had learned that much today. Naruto looked down at his hands. The same hands that had been branded by the villagers' hate and fear. The hands that had once been nothing but a symbol of defiance, of loneliness. Now, they were something more. He clenched them again, tighter this time, as if vowing to hold onto this new path, to control this power, and to use it for something greater than just himself. It was then that he felt it, a presence approaching. It wasn't Sasuke returning for another round of sparring. No, this felt different, more deliberate, more composed. Naruto turned just as the figure emerged from the shadows. Shikamaru. Didn't think you'd be out here, Naruto, Shikamaru said. His voice as lazy as always. But there was an underlying seriousness to it. His hands were shoved in his pockets as he walked toward Naruto, his eyes scanning the destruction around them. You really went all out. Huh? Naruto gave a half smile, his mind still replaying his fight with Sasuke. Yeah. Something like that. He replied, his voice light, but there was an edge of fatigue beneath it. Just needed to get something off my chest. Shikamaru stopped a few feet away, his gaze lingering on Naruto's form. You've been holding something in for a while now. Huh? He asked, his tone softer. I don't need to be a genius to see it. The way you've been acting. It's not like before. You change. Naruto looked at him, the weight of Shikamaru's words settling over him. Yeah, he admitted, scratching the back of his head. I guess I have. Shikamaru watched him for a moment, his face unreadable. It's not just the power. Is it? It's everything. The way you carry yourself now. It's different. Naruto felt the weight of those words. Shikamaru had always been the one to see things that others didn't. He wasn't as outwardly emotional as some, but he understood more than most. Naruto hadn't expected him to be the one to notice this change. But here they were, standing in the aftermath of a fight. And Shikamaru had already figured it out. I don't want to be that guy anymore, Naruto said quietly, his gaze shifting to the ground. The one who just charges in without thinking, without purpose. I've got power now. And I don't want to mess it up. Shikamaru tilted his head slightly, the faintest of smirks tugging at his lips. Ha! I never thought I'd hear you say that. But it makes sense. You've always been a bit of a hothead. But now? You've got the power to back it up. But if you just go around smashing everything in sight, you won't be much better than the people you're fighting against. Naruto looked up, meeting Shikamaru's eyes. I know. That's what I've been thinking about. But there's a part of me that feels like I have to do something with this power. You know? Shikamaru nodded slowly. Yeah. I get it. But just remember, being the strongest doesn't make you right. You got to think about what you're doing. Why you're doing it. There are people who will look to you for guidance. Naruto. You can't afford to be reckless anymore. The words hit harder than Naruto had anticipated. They weren't harsh, but they were true. He had always struggled with the idea of leadership. What did it mean to be a leader? Was it about strength? Was it about being the most powerful? Or was it about something deeper? Something that couldn't be measured in raw power alone? Naruto stared at Shikamaru for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I get it. Shikamaru. Thanks. Shikamaru gave him a slight nod, his expression still calm but with a quiet approval in his eyes. Just don't forget what you're fighting for, Naruto. Power's nothing without purpose. And you've got plenty of people who are counting on you. Naruto stood there, processing Shikamaru's words. He had always known that strength was important, but now he understood that it wasn't everything. He couldn't just rely on his fists anymore. He had to lead with his heart as much as with his strength. Thanks, Shikamaru, Naruto said with a grin. I'll keep that in mind. Shikamaru gave him a lazy wave. Just don't do anything too stupid. Okay. We've got enough trouble as it is. Naruto chuckled, the tension from the day slowly easing as the weight of his decisions began to settle in. I won't. But I can't promise I won't make a little trouble along the way. With that, Shikamaru disappeared back into the shadows of the trees, leaving Naruto alone with his thoughts once more. The stars above were beginning to twinkle brighter, and the moon shone down, casting a gentle light over the village. For the first time, Naruto felt like he could breathe, like he was on the right path. The path wasn't just about power, it was about purpose. He wasn't just fighting for recognition anymore. He was fighting for something bigger. He was fighting for the future. And he would make sure that future was one worth living. The night had grown deeper, and Naruto stood in the stillness of the clearing, the weight of his thoughts pressing against him. Shikamaru's words echoed in his mind like a guiding light, a reminder that his journey was far from over. There was still much for him to learn, not just about his newfound power, but about himself, about what kind of person he wanted to be. He looked up at the sky again, the stars now shining in full brilliance above Konoha. The moon hung low, casting its pale light over the village as if watching over everything. The village he had always dreamed of protecting. The village that had once rejected him. He had come so far. But there was so much more to do. Naruto's thoughts turned toward the Hokage. The position that had once been nothing more than a dream. A title he had longed for to prove he was worthy. To prove that he belonged. But now, with the power of Garp inside him, things felt different. He wasn't sure what it meant anymore. Was becoming Hokage still the ultimate goal? Or had he outgrown that ambition in some way? Now that the power to protect was already within his grasp, he clenched his fist once again. But this time the movement wasn't out of frustration. It was a silent vow. He wasn't going to let this power define him. He would define it. Turning back toward the village, Naruto set his eyes on the Hokage monument. The faces of the past leaders of Konoha carved into the stone. They had all fought for the village in their own ways. But now, Naruto was different. He wasn't just a kid who wanted recognition. He had the strength to protect his people in ways they could never imagine. A rustling sound caught his attention, and Naruto instinctively dropped into a ready stance. His senses heightened by the power flowing through him. The bushes to his left shook again. And from the shadows emerged a figure. Someone he hadn't expected. It was Sakura. Naruto stood still for a moment, his eyes meeting hers. She was panting, her face flushed from the exertion of running. Her usual pink hair a bit disheveled. There was concern in her eyes. But also something else, something deeper. A familiarity. A bond that Naruto hadn't realized he still held with her until now. Sakura? Naruto said, lowering his stance slightly. Sakura's eyes softened. But there was still a hint of worry in them. She walked forward slowly. Her gaze flickering around the destruction left in the wake of his battle with Sasuke. Naruto, I heard you were fighting Sasuke. Naruto scratched the back of his head. A sheepish grin crossing his face. Yeah. We kind of went all out. You know how we are. Sakura sighed, clearly trying to stay calm. But Naruto could tell she was worried. She had always been able to see through his facade. I was worried, she admitted, looking directly at him. You've been acting different lately, and not in a good way. Naruto's expression faltered. He had always tried to hide the doubts, the questions, even from her. But it seemed that no matter how much he tried to bury them, someone always noticed. Sakura was no exception. What do you mean? Naruto asked, trying to mask the weight of his thoughts with a forced grin. I'm just stronger now. Right? Sakura shook her head slowly, her eyes scanning his face, searching for the truth beneath the bravado. It's not just about strength, Naruto. I know you've been through a lot, and I know what this power must feel like. But I'm worried about you. You're changing, and I don't know if it's for the better. Naruto's heart twisted at the concern in her voice. He knew she was right. He had been changing, but he wasn't sure he could explain it to her. He wasn't sure he understood it himself. The power inside him, the sense of invincibility, it was intoxicating. But was it the right thing to lean into? Was it the person he truly wanted to become? Sakura took another step forward, her voice softer now. You've always been the person who cared about protecting everyone. Naruto. You didn't need to be the strongest to do that. You just needed to care. Her eyes searched his, looking for the Naruto she used to know. The one who was always driven by his desire to protect. No matter the cost. Please. Don't lose that part of you. Naruto swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling in. He had always prided himself on his ability to protect the people he cared about, even if it meant putting himself in harm's way. But now he had the power to do so much more. The temptation to rely on that power was overwhelming. And part of him feared that if he did, he would lose everything he had worked for. All the bonds, all the relationships, all the things that had made him human. Would the power of Garp change him beyond recognition? I'm not going to lose myself. Sakura? Naruto said finally, his voice quiet but firm. I promise. Sakura studied him for a long moment, her expression softening, but the concern in her eyes never fully disappearing. I hope you're right, she said, almost to herself. Naruto nodded slowly, his resolve hardening. He wasn't going to lose himself. Not again. Not after everything he had fought for. He had the power to protect, to change the world. But he wouldn't let that power consume him. I'm not the same kid I used to be, Naruto said, his voice growing more confident. But I'm still me. And I'll always be the one who fights for the people I care about." Sakura smiled faintly, though it was still tinged with worry. "Just remember what's really important, Naruto. Strength isn't everything." Naruto nodded, feeling the weight of her words sink deep into his chest. As much as he had changed, some things would never change. His heart would always be with his friends, his village, and the people who had stuck by him through it all. "I won't forget," he said softly, turning his gaze back to the village, the Hokage monument, and the future that awaited him. He had a long road ahead, one filled with challenges and questions, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the right path. As Sakura turned to leave, she paused and looked back at him one last time. "Just be careful, Naruto," she said, her voice gentle. "You have the power to change everything. But that doesn't mean you have to do it alone." Naruto watched her go, her figure disappearing into the night. Her words lingered in the air, and for the first time, he felt like the weight of his power wasn't just a burden. It was a responsibility. And with that responsibility came choices. Choices that would define the kind of man he would become. Naruto stood there for a while longer, lost in his thoughts, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. But he wasn't afraid. He had always carried that weight. And now, more than ever, he knew that he was ready to face whatever came next. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Naruto stood alone in the clearing long after Sakura had left, his thoughts swirling around him like the wind rustling the leaves. The weight of his transformation, both in terms of power and self-awareness, was heavier than he had anticipated. He had always known that strength came with responsibility, but now, after awakening the power of Garp, it felt more real than ever. The silence of the night enveloped him, but the storm inside his mind wouldn't quiet. He had always been reckless, charging headfirst into battle without a second thought. But now, with the ability to decimate entire villages with a single strike, how could he afford to be so impulsive? He wasn't just Naruto Uzumaki anymore. He was something more, someone who held the power of a legend. But even as these doubts gnawed at him, another part of him was excited. He had always dreamed of this level of power, of control over his own fate. It was everything he'd ever wanted. Yet it felt so lonely. How could anyone understand what he was going through? How could they relate to someone who held the strength of 1,000 warriors? A sharp gust of wind blew across the clearing, snapping Naruto out of his thoughts. His eyes scanned the horizon once more, and for a moment, he thought he saw something in the distance. A flicker of movement, like a shadow in the trees. His instincts kicked in, and before he could even think, his body was already in motion, rushing toward the source of the disturbance. As he sprinted through the woods, his mind sharpened, the power of Garp heightening his senses to a level beyond anything he had experienced before. Every step, every breath, was in sync with the world around him. He could hear the faintest sounds of rustling leaves and the distant chirp of crickets. His eyes locked onto a dark figure ahead, concealed by the foliage. Naruto slowed his pace, coming to a quiet stop behind a large tree. He knew it wasn't an enemy. His chakra senses would have alerted him if it was. Instead, he waited, his mind racing through the possibilities. Could it be someone else from the village? Had someone come looking for him after his fight with Sasuke? He wasn't expecting the voice that cut through the silence. Naruto. The voice was calm, almost soothing, yet it carried an unmistakable authority. It was neither a friend nor a foe, but something else entirely. Someone who knew more about the situation than Naruto was ready for. Naruto stepped forward cautiously, his body tensing, but his heart recognized the voice instantly. "Jiraiya-sensei?" Naruto called out, his voice uncertain but filled with recognition, emerging from the shadows. Jiraiya stepped into the moonlight, his long white hair flowing behind him, and his red cloak billowing with every step. The legendary Sannin's sharp eyes met Naruto's, and for a moment, there was a strange silence between them, an unspoken understanding. "You've changed, Naruto," Jiraiya said, his voice low but filled with curiosity. "I can feel it. That power, there's something about it. It's not like anything I've ever sensed before." Naruto stood up straighter, trying to mask the tension he felt deep inside. It's "It's not something I really asked for," he said quietly. "It just kind of happened. Garp's power. I mean, it's like it's been inside me for a long time, waiting to be unlocked. And now, I don't really know what to do with it." Jiraiya nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he studied Naruto. "The power of Garp. Huh? That explains a lot. Not many people can tap into that kind of strength. But I can see it in your eyes, Naruto. You're struggling with it. And that's normal. Power like that doesn't come without consequences." Naruto clenched his fists, his face hardening. "I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't want to be like the others, using my strength for the wrong reasons. I don't want to become like the people who hurt me. Or worse, the people I've fought against." Jiraiya's expression softened. "It's good that you understand that, Naruto. But you need to remember something important. You've always been the kind of person who fights for the right reasons. That hasn't changed. Even now. What matters is how you choose to use this power." Naruto looked away, his mind racing. "But how do I know what the right choice is? I've spent my whole life trying to prove myself, trying to be someone people could look up to. Now I have this power. And I don't even know what it means anymore. I can destroy anything in my path. But I'm afraid that if I do, I'll lose everything I've worked for." Jiraiya took a step closer, his voice firm but kind. "You're not just fighting for power, Naruto. You're fighting for what you believe in. Your strength doesn't define you. It's your choices, your heart, that do. Remember what you've always stood for. You don't need to be the strongest to be the best. You just need to be the kind of person who cares for others, who values the bonds you've made." Naruto stood still, taking in Jiraiya's words. His chest felt tight, as if something was shifting inside him. The weight of the power inside him wasn't just about raw strength, it was about responsibility. He had always fought with the belief that his bonds would guide him. But now, with the power to level mountains, he couldn't afford to take those bonds for granted. "I get it, Sensei," Naruto said finally, a calm resolve in his voice. "I have to make sure I don't forget what's important. I don't want to lose myself in all of this." Jiraiya smiled faintly, placing a hand on Naruto's shoulder. "You've always known what's important, Naruto. It's just a matter of remembering that, no matter how much power you have." The two stood there for a while, the night air thick with the weight of their conversation. Naruto felt something stir within him, a sense of clarity, a flicker of hope in the face of his internal storm. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he was beginning to understand. He wasn't alone in this. He had people who cared about him, who were there to help him find his way. "I'll keep that in mind, Jiraiya-sensei," Naruto said, the confidence in his voice growing. "Thanks for being here." Jiraiya nodded, his smile widening slightly. "Anytime, kid. Just remember, strength doesn't come from punching harder. It comes from knowing when to punch, and when to hold back." Naruto laughed softly, the tension in his chest easing. "I'll try my best." As Jiraiya turned to leave, his figure disappearing into the night once more, Naruto felt a new sense of purpose. The road ahead was still uncertain, and his power would continue to test him. But now, for the first time, he felt like he wasn't walking that road alone. And for that, he was grateful. Naruto stood alone in the clearing, his eyes following Jiraiya's figure until it was swallowed by the shadows of the forest. The weight of the Sanin's words still lingered in his mind, like a subtle yet powerful force pushing him forward, urging him to embrace not just his strength, but the responsibility that came with it. The night felt different now. It wasn't just the cool air that brushed against his skin or the faint rustling of the leaves. It was the knowledge that something inside him had shifted. That subtle change, the beginning of a new chapter in his life. His journey was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. Naruto took a deep breath, the air filling his lungs, clearing his mind. He wasn't going to let the power of Garp consume him. Not now. And not ever. He had to remember the lessons he'd learned from the past, the people who had supported him, the bonds that kept him grounded. And most importantly, he had to remember who he was before all of this, the kid who dreamed of becoming Hokage. Who had fought to be seen, to be accepted. With a final glance at the Hokage monument looming in the distance, Naruto turned and started walking back toward the village. His strides were purposeful, and there was a quiet confidence in the way he moved now. He had been lost in his thoughts for too long. But now, he had a clearer vision. He would keep his focus on the people he cared about, the village, his friends, and the ideals he held dear. As he approached the gates of Konoha, the familiar sight of the village's bustling streets greeted him. The night was still young, and most villagers were wrapping up their daily routines. Naruto took in the sights, the children playing in the streets, the merchants closing their shops, the sound of laughter from a nearby bar. It all felt so normal, so peaceful. But beneath that tranquility, there was always a sense of unease, the knowledge that danger could strike at any moment. Naruto's thoughts drifted back to Sasuke. The fight they had shared weighed heavily on him. He had felt the anger, the bitterness, and the frustration in his old friend. But Sasuke was gone now, lost to a path of darkness that Naruto couldn't follow. The bond they had shared was severed, and though part of him still longed to bring Sasuke back, another part of him understood that he couldn't force someone to walk a path they didn't want to. Sasuke had made his choice. That realization, painful as it was, gave Naruto a sense of closure. He would no longer chase after a friend who didn't want to be found. Sasuke had to find his own way, just as Naruto had to find his own. As Naruto approached the village square, a familiar face caught his eye. Sasuke's older brother, Itachi, stood leaning against the side of a building, his arms crossed over his chest. Itachi's expression was as unreadable as ever, but there was a glimmer of something in his eyes, something Naruto couldn't quite place. "Naruto," Itachi greeted him calmly, his voice smooth and quiet. Naruto stopped in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. Itachi had always been a mystery to him, someone who held secrets that could shatter the very foundation of everything Naruto had believed in. But Naruto had learned over time that Itachi was no simple enemy. He was a complex figure, a man who had sacrificed everything for the greater good. "What do you want, Itachi?" Naruto asked, keeping his tone neutral. Itachi's eyes softened slightly, his lips curling into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I see you've gained new strength," he said, his gaze sweeping over Naruto's form as if assessing him. "But power like that can be both a blessing and a curse." Naruto frowned, crossing his arms. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you must tread carefully," Itachi replied, his voice carrying a certain weight. "Garp's power is immense, but so is the temptation to misuse it. It's not the strength you wield, but how you choose to wield it that will define you." Naruto felt a shiver run down his spine, and though Itachi's words were not unfamiliar to him, the weight of them felt different now. Itachi wasn't just speaking in riddles. He was warning him about the path that lay ahead. "I know what I'm doing," Naruto said, his voice firm but quiet. He wasn't sure why, but the intensity of Itachi's gaze seemed to pierce through him, as if the older Uchiha could see everything, the doubts, the fears, and the lingering uncertainties that had not been fully addressed. Itachi gave a single nod, his expression unreadable once more. "I hope for your sake that you do. But remember, Naruto, there are forces beyond your understanding, forces that seek to use your power for their own purposes. Be cautious of those who would try to manipulate you." Before Naruto could respond, Itachi turned and walked into the shadows, disappearing into the night as silently as he had appeared. The warning hung in the air like a lingering storm cloud. Itachi had never been one to offer advice lightly, and Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that the older Uchiha had seen something in him, something that even he hadn't fully realized yet. Shaking his head to clear the lingering unease, Naruto continued his walk through the village, each step bringing him closer to the heart of Konoha. The streets were bustling with activity, and Naruto found himself smiling as he passed familiar faces. Choji, Hinata, and even Kiba were out and about, laughing and enjoying the evening. He could sense the peace in the air, the warmth of home. The weight of his power still sat heavily on his shoulders, but for the first time since awakening it, he felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't alone in this. There were people who cared about him, people who believed in him, and he would do everything in his power to protect them, to protect the village that had once rejected him, but had since become his home. As he approached the Hokage tower, he saw the familiar silhouette of Kakashi standing at the entrance, looking out over the village. His old teacher had always been a constant, even in the most difficult of times. "Hey, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto called out, his voice light and carefree. "What's going on?" Kakashi turned to face him, his lazy gaze turning into a knowing smile. "Just keeping an eye on things," Kakashi replied, his tone calm. "I see you've been busy." Naruto's grin widened. "Yeah, you could say that. But I'm figuring it out. One step at a time." Kakashi nodded approvingly, his eye glinting with pride. "You've always been a step ahead, Naruto. I have no doubt you'll find your way." Naruto stood there for a moment, looking up at the Hokage monument. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was truly ready for whatever came next. The power of Garp was a force to be reckoned with. But it didn't define him. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and nothing would ever change that. "I'm going to make sure I don't forget what really matters," Naruto said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "I'll protect everyone, no matter what." Kakashi gave him a small, approving smile. "I know you will, Naruto." And with that, Naruto took a deep breath and turned toward the future. His heart set on the path ahead. The road would be long, and the challenges many. But he wasn't walking it alone. The bonds he had forged would guide him, and with his friends by his side, he knew he could face whatever the world threw at him. The journey of a Hokage was not an easy one. But for Naruto, it was the only one worth walking. The cool breeze swept through Konoha, rustling the leaves of the trees as Naruto walked through the village, a sense of determination radiating from him. The weight of his new strength was still a constant presence, but now it felt less like a burden and more like a tool, something he could wield with purpose. His thoughts were clearer than they had been in a long time, and although the path ahead seemed daunting, he was ready to face whatever challenges would come his way. As Naruto approached the Hokage Tower, he noticed a flicker of movement at the base of the monument. A flash of black hair. The silhouette of a figure standing still, as if waiting for something. Naruto squinted, recognizing the figure immediately. "Sasuke," Naruto called out, his voice filled with both surprise and curiosity. He hadn't expected to see the Uchiha again, especially not this soon after their confrontation. Was Sasuke back in the village already? Sasuke turned slowly, his dark eyes meeting Naruto's with that familiar intensity. The space between them seemed charged, as if the air itself held the weight of their past encounters, their unspoken rivalry, and the lingering bond that had yet to be completely severed. "Naruto," Sasuke said, his voice as calm as always, though there was a trace of something unreadable in his gaze. "I didn't expect you to come looking for me." Naruto stopped a few paces away, unsure of what to say at first. The last time they had spoken, their fight had ended with no clear resolution. There had been anger, frustration, and a deep sense of loss. But now, with his newfound power, Naruto wasn't sure how to approach Sasuke. Was there still a chance for reconciliation? Or had their paths truly diverged forever? "I wasn't looking for you," Naruto replied, his voice steady. "But you know, I wasn't going to let things end like that. You were my friend, Sasuke. You're still important to me." Sasuke's gaze softened just slightly, the walls he usually kept up faltering for a brief moment. "I've changed, Naruto," Sasuke said, his words almost a whisper, as though speaking them aloud made them feel more real. "The things I've done. The path I've chosen. I don't think I can go back to what we had." Naruto shook his head, his eyes hardening. "It's not about going back, Sasuke. It's about moving forward. We don't have to be the same as we were before. But we don't have to stay apart either. We're both on different paths. But that doesn't mean we can't walk the same road sometimes." Sasuke remained silent, his expression unreadable, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of something. Something that could have been hesitation, or perhaps regret. "You've changed too," Sasuke finally said, his voice low. "This power. What you've become. I can feel it, Naruto. It's unlike anything I've ever sensed before. You're not just the boy I knew anymore. You're something more." Naruto took a step forward, his gaze intense. "And so are you, Sasuke. You're not the same guy the first fought before either. You've grown, for better or worse. But I'm still here. I'm still your friend. No matter how strong I get. No matter what happens. That won't change." Sasuke looked away, his gaze drifting to the distant Hokage monument. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, as if neither of them knew what to say next. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Sasuke spoke again, his voice softer this time, almost imperceptible. "I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for what I've done," Sasuke admitted, his eyes closed. "But maybe I'll find a way to make things right. For both of us." Naruto's heart skipped a beat, and he smiled, albeit faintly. It wasn't the resolution he had hoped for, but it was a start. A crack in the wall that had separated them for so long. They weren't there yet, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, their paths could cross again someday. "Take your time, Sasuke," Naruto said softly. "I'm not going anywhere. And when you're ready, I'll be here." Sasuke nodded once, his expression unreadable once more. "I don't know what the future holds, Naruto. But I'll keep that in mind." With that, Sasuke turned and disappeared into the shadows of the village, his form vanishing as quickly as he had come. Naruto stood there for a moment, staring at the spot where his friend had just been. He didn't know what the future would bring, or if Sasuke would ever truly come back. But one thing was clear. There was still a chance, no matter how small, that they could find a way back to each other. Naruto exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing as he watched the stars twinkling above. The road ahead was long, filled with uncertainty and challenges, but he was no longer afraid. He had Garp's power, yes, but more importantly, he had his friends, his bonds, and the unwavering belief that he could always find a way forward. He turned toward the Hokage Tower once more, walking with renewed determination. There was still work to be done, still a village to protect, still a future to fight for. As he stepped into the tower, he was greeted by the familiar sight of Kakashi, who was waiting by the large window overlooking the village. "You've been gone for a while," Kakashi said with a raised eyebrow, his voice light but knowing. "You make a habit of disappearing like that now, Naruto?" Naruto chuckled, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. "Sorry, sensei. Got caught up in some thoughts." Kakashi's single eye crinkled in a smile. "I figured. You've always been one for deep thinking." Naruto paused, his eyes softening as he looked at his sensei. "I've learned a lot recently, Kakashi-sensei. I've got a long way to go, but I think I'm starting to understand things a little better." Kakashi gave him a knowing look, as if he understood exactly what Naruto was talking about. "I'm glad to hear that. The power you have is extraordinary, Naruto. But it's not just about the power. It's about what you do with it. And knowing you, I have no doubt you'll figure it out." Naruto smiled, his confidence growing with each word. "Thanks, Kakashi-sensei. I won't let you down." The two of them stood there for a moment, gazing out over the village as the night deepened. Konoha was peaceful, but Naruto knew that peace was fragile. There were still threats lurking in the shadows, still enemies who sought to tear everything down. But for now, he had the strength, the will, and the heart to protect it all. And with that thought, Naruto felt ready. Ready for whatever came next. The world might be uncertain, but he wasn't walking it alone anymore. He had his friends, his bonds, and the strength to forge ahead. The road ahead was long and filled with challenges, but Naruto was ready to face it all, head on. The morning sun rose slowly over Konoha, casting a warm golden hue across the village. The streets were already alive with activity as villagers went about their daily routines. Naruto stood at the edge of the Hokage Tower's balcony, his arms crossed, watching the dawn break over the familiar landscape. The night's conversation with Sasuke had left him with a lot to think about, and though there was no clear resolution, something within him had shifted. He knew, more than ever, that the road to becoming Hokage wasn't just about strength. It was about leadership, the ability to protect not only through power but through compassion, understanding, and resolve. Sasuke's words, the brief glimmer of hesitation in his eyes, had told Naruto that even the most resolute hearts could still be uncertain. Even someone like Sasuke, who had walked the path of vengeance, could one day look for redemption. Naruto's musings were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Sensei. Naruto greeted Kakashi without missing a beat. His tone was calm, collected. Yet there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice that betrayed his thoughts. Kakashi stepped beside him, leaning on the railing as he gazed out over the village. I see you've been up for a while. Taking in the view? Naruto nodded slowly. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot, Kakashi-sensei. About Sasuke. About everything. I know, Kakashi said quietly. I can sense it. You've always been a thinker. But this time feels different. You've changed. Naruto. I can see it. Naruto turned to look at his former teacher. Kakashi's single visible eye was fixed on the horizon. But there was a depth to his gaze that Naruto understood all too well. Kakashi had seen so much, lived through so many battles, and carried burdens heavier than most could imagine. His words carried weight, even if they were few. I'm not sure if I can ever fully understand what Sasuke's gone through, Naruto continued, his voice tinged with frustration. But I can't just let him go. Not like that. He was my friend. He is my friend. And even if he doesn't want to admit it, we're still connected in a way that no one else can understand. Kakashi's gaze softened. Naruto. You don't have to save everyone. Not every person wants to be saved. And not everyone is ready for redemption. You fought for Sasuke before. But now, you need to focus on yourself too. On your own growth. Your own future. Naruto clenched his fists, feeling a sharp pang in his chest. It was true. He had put so much of himself into bringing Sasuke back that he had, at times, lost sight of his own dreams, his own path. But now, with the power of Garp coursing through him, he could no longer afford to be held back by the past. He had his own journey to make. I know, sensei. Naruto finally said, his voice steady. I've got to move forward. Even if Sasuke doesn't come with me. I've got to protect the village. Protect everyone who's important to me. Kakashi nodded approvingly. That's the spirit, Naruto. The road ahead won't be easy. But you've always had the heart to face any challenge. You'll find your way. Naruto took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his new power settle into his bones. He was ready for what came next. Whether it was protecting the village, dealing with whatever dark forces lurked in the shadows, or even facing down Sasuke again. If it came to that. But there was something else. Something Kakashi had said that was lingering in his mind. His teacher's words about focusing on himself, on his own future. That meant more than just fighting. It meant understanding the weight of his actions, the consequences of using his strength, and knowing that he had to grow beyond the battles, beyond the power he wielded. Thanks, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said quietly, the gratitude in his voice clear. I won't let you down. You've never let anyone down. Naruto. Kakashi replied with a small smile. Now, it's time for you to find your own way. Later that day, Naruto stood in front of the Hokage's office. His heart pounding in his chest. Today was the day he would finally step into the role he had always dreamed of. He was no longer the loud, obnoxious kid who caused trouble just to get attention. He wasn't just a ninja with big dreams. He had proven himself. He had earned the strength he possessed. And now, it was time to show the village what it meant. Tsunade was sitting behind her desk when he entered. Her expression unreadable but the faintest flicker of approval in her eyes. Naruto. Tsunade greeted him. Her voice firm yet welcoming. You're early. I take it you've been thinking about our conversation? Yeah, Naruto said, walking into the room and standing at attention. I've been thinking about a lot of things. But mostly, about my future. About what kind of Hokage I want to be. Tsunade nodded, folding her hands on the desk in front of her. I think you've already figured that out more than most. You've grown a lot, Naruto. More than I expected. But this isn't just about strength. You know, it's about leadership. About making choices that will affect the entire village. You need to be ready for that responsibility. Naruto swallowed, his eyes narrowing with determination. I'm ready, Tsunade-sama. I've learned a lot. About power. About friendship. About sacrifice. I'm ready to protect Konoha with everything I have. And I want to do it in a way that honors the past and ensures a better future for everyone. Tsunade leaned back in her chair, her eyes studying Naruto intently. There was no doubt in her mind that he had the potential to become the leader Konoha needed. But the power that he wielded now, Garp's power, was something that could destroy just as easily as it could protect. "You're still a long way from becoming Hokage, Naruto," Tsunade said, her voice serious. "There's a lot more to leadership than being strong. But I've seen your heart. I've seen what you're capable of. And that's why I'm willing to trust you." Naruto's heart swelled with pride at her words. But there was a humbling weight to them as well. Tsunade was the 5th Hokage for a reason. She had seen the best and worst of the village. And if she believed in him, he wasn't going to let her down. "I won't let you down," Naruto said, his voice firm, his resolve stronger than ever. Tsunade smiled faintly, a rare expression from the usually stoic Hokage. "I know you won't, Naruto. Just remember, your strength is a gift. But it's also a responsibility. The village is watching you now. They need to believe in you as much as you believe in yourself." Naruto nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone he loved, everyone he had sworn to protect. And he would not fail them, no matter the cost. "Thanks, Tsunade-sama," Naruto said, his voice quieter now. "I won't let Konoha fall." With that, he turned and left the office, his heart racing as he stepped back into the village. The people he had sworn to protect were counting on him now. And he was ready to face whatever came next. He didn't know what dangers lurked ahead. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He had the strength, the will, and the heart to face it all. Naruto's journey had only just begun. But now, more than ever, he felt ready to take the next step toward becoming the Hokage he had always dreamed of being. The day stretched on as Naruto walked through the village, his thoughts swirling with the weight of the conversation he had just had with Tsunade. Being the Hokage wasn't a title he could simply claim. It was something he had to earn every day, through action and leadership. His power was unparalleled. But Tsunade's words echoed in his mind, reminding him that strength alone wouldn't be enough. He had to inspire trust, show compassion, and lead with wisdom. As he made his way toward the village gates, Naruto couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. Garp's power, the battles, his rivalry with Sasuke, and his relationship with the villagers. They were all pieces of a much larger puzzle. But for the first time, he felt a sense of clarity. He had never been more sure of what he wanted, and who he wanted to be. A familiar voice broke his reverie. "Oi, Naruto." Naruto turned to see Sakura approaching him, her usual pink hair bouncing with each step. She wore her standard vest and kunai pouch. But her eyes were soft, showing a warmth that only a few people could inspire in her. Naruto had always been grateful for Sakura's friendship, especially now, as she had been one of the few to stand by him through everything. Their relationship had evolved over time, moving past the awkwardness and misunderstandings of their youth. Now, there was a sense of mutual respect between them. "Sakura," Naruto greeted with a grin, though his smile didn't fully reach his eyes. He had been lost in thought. "You're up to something, aren't you?" Sakura teased, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "I can see it in your eyes. You're plotting something big." Naruto's grin faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "You're always so sharp. You know me too well." Sakura raised an eyebrow, but then her expression softened. "I know that look. You're thinking about the future." "Huh? About the Hokage title?" Naruto blinked. "Yeah. How'd you guess?" Sakura chuckled. "It's obvious. You've always wanted to become Hokage. And now you have the strength to protect this village. But I know you, Naruto. This isn't just about power for you. It's about something deeper." Naruto scratched the back of his head, a little embarrassed by her insight. "Yeah, I guess. It's just, it feels like there's so much more to do now. So many people rely on me. And I can't let them down." Sakura stepped closer, her expression serious. "Naruto, you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. And so are the others. We've been through so much together. And we've always had each other's backs. You're not in this alone." Naruto's heart swelled with gratitude. He had always known that his friends cared for him. But hearing it from Sakura, in such a sincere way, made him feel less alone in his journey. "Thanks, Sakura. That means a lot." Sakura smiled, then glanced at the village gates. So, what's your next move? Are you going to keep training? Or are you going to try and handle some of the Hokage responsibilities? Naruto's eyes turned to the village, a determined fire flickering in them. I think it's time to start leading. I don't have all the answers, but I can't wait around forever. I need to show everyone that I'm more than just a kid with big dreams. I need to show them that I'm ready. Sakura gave him an approving nod. I think you're already there. Naruto. You've grown so much. But just remember, we're all here for you. And sometimes, that means leaning on others. I will. Naruto promised. I won't forget that. Just as they were about to continue their conversation, a sudden burst of chakra energy shot through the village. It was unmistakable. The intensity, the sheer force behind it. It felt familiar, but also dangerous. Naruto's eyes widened. What was that? He asked, turning to Sakura. Sakura's eyes narrowed, and she instantly fell into a combat-ready stance. I don't know, but we should check it out. Without another word, both of them darted towards the source of the chakra, moving quickly through the streets. As they reached the outer perimeter of Konoha, they saw what was causing the disturbance. A tall figure stood at the edge of the village, his silhouette imposing against the backdrop of the setting sun. His black cloak billowed in the wind, and his eyes, red with the Sharingan, glowed ominously. Naruto and Sakura stopped in their tracks as they both recognized the figure before them. Sasuke. Naruto muttered under his breath. Sasuke stood there, calm and composed, his hands in his pockets as he surveyed the village with a mixture of indifference and something darker, something that suggested he had come for a purpose. But what purpose? After everything that had happened between them. Why was Sasuke here? Now? Standing on the outskirts of Konoha as though nothing had changed? Sakura's gaze hardened. Naruto. Do you think he's come to fight? Naruto shook his head, his gaze never leaving Sasuke. I don't know. But I'm not going to back down. Sasuke's eyes finally locked with Naruto's, and for a moment, time seemed to slow between them. There was no anger in Sasuke's gaze, no bitterness, only something Naruto couldn't quite read. You're stronger now, Sasuke said, his voice cutting through the tension. I can feel it. But strength alone isn't enough. Naruto's hand instinctively moved to his waist, where the kunai rested, but he didn't draw it. I'm not here to fight, Sasuke. But if that's what you want, I'll give it to you. Just know that I'm not the same kid you fought before. Sasuke's eyes flickered, but he remained silent for a moment, as though contemplating Naruto's words. Finally, he spoke again. I didn't come here to fight either, Naruto, Sasuke replied, his voice low but clear. But I didn't come here for peace either. I came to test you. Naruto frowned, confused. Test me? For what? For the future, Sasuke answered, his voice tinged with a sharpness that didn't go unnoticed by Sakura. Your strength has grown. But strength alone isn't the key. It's how you use it that matters. Naruto's expression hardened, his resolve unwavering. I'm not going to let anyone destroy Konoha. I won't let power be used for destruction anymore. Sasuke's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, but then he nodded slowly. We'll see. And just like that, Sasuke turned, his chakra flaring once more as he began to walk away from Konoha. It was as if he had come merely to gauge Naruto's power. To see if the boy, now a man, had truly grown into something greater than his former self. Sakura let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her eyes never leaving Sasuke's retreating figure. That was strange. Naruto stood there, his fists clenched, but his mind racing. Sasuke wasn't here to fight. Not yet. Anyway. But something had changed in Sasuke. He had come to test Naruto. To see if the path Naruto walked now was the right one. What did that mean for their future? And why did Sasuke, after all this time, still feel the need to test him? Naruto turned towards Sakura, his face serious. I don't know what's going on with Sasuke, but I won't let him destroy everything I've worked for. Not again. Sakura nodded, her expression one of agreement. We'll handle this together, Naruto. And with that, they turned back toward Konoha, the weight of their conversation with Sasuke hanging over them like a storm cloud. The future was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Naruto wasn't backing down. Not from Sasuke. Not from anyone. His journey was just beginning. As Naruto and Sakura made their way back into the village, the uneasy feeling in Naruto's chest only grew stronger. Sasuke's unexpected visit had left more questions than answers. He wasn't here to fight. At least not yet. But his cryptic words about testing Naruto left a deep impression on the young Hokage to be. What had Sasuke meant by that? And why now? After all this time, was he showing interest in Naruto's growth? Sakura, sensing the shift in Naruto's mood, stayed silent for a while, knowing that it was best to let him process things in his own time. The streets of Konoha were bustling with activity, yet Naruto walked as if in a haze, his mind racing with possibilities. It wasn't long before they reached the Hokage's office again. Tsunade was there, waiting for them, her sharp eyes immediately catching the tension in Naruto's posture. You've seen him, haven't you? Tsunade's voice was soft but knowing. Her gaze focused on Naruto. Naruto nodded. Yeah. Sasuke showed up at the village gates. He said he came to test me. Tsunade leaned back in her chair, folding her arms as she considered Naruto's words. Test you for what? Exactly? I don't know, Naruto admitted, his frustration palpable. He didn't come to fight. But he didn't come for peace either. He just wanted to see if I've changed. If I'm ready for what's ahead. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, her expression serious. I see. Sasuke's always been like that, testing people without giving any answers. But this could be more than just a test of your strength, Naruto. It sounds like he's trying to figure out what path you're really walking. Naruto's brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Tsunade sighed, her gaze softening. Strength isn't just about power, Naruto. It's about purpose. And Sasuke, deep down, is still struggling to find his own purpose. He's not going to find peace through destruction. But he also won't find it if he keeps testing people. It sounds like he's trying to see if you're ready to lead in a way that's different from how he's led his own life. Naruto looked down, processing her words. Sasuke had always been a complicated figure in his life. And their bond had been forged in battle, tested by time, and scarred by betrayal. But what if Sasuke wasn't truly lost? What if there was still a chance to reach him? To pull him from the darkness? I'll find my way, Tsunade-sama, Naruto said, lifting his head and meeting her gaze with newfound resolve. I won't let him down again. And I'll make sure Konoha stays strong, no matter what. Tsunade studied him for a long moment before nodding. I know you will. But remember, Naruto. Being the leader means making difficult choices. There will be more tests ahead. Maybe not from Sasuke, but from the world itself. Your power is immense. But your heart must remain steady. Naruto's fingers clenched into fists, his determination hardening. I'm ready. I'll face whatever comes. Later that evening, as the sun began to set over the village, Naruto sat in a secluded spot near the Hokage monument. He had come here to think, to reflect on the weight of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. But his mind kept wandering back to Sasuke and their complicated past. The wind rustled through the trees, and the sounds of the village life seemed distant, as if the world was waiting for him to make a decision. He was alone with his thoughts, something he wasn't always good at. He had spent so much of his life pushing forward, charging into situations without thinking them through, driven by his need to be accepted, to be recognized as someone important. But now, as he stood on the precipice of becoming the Hokage, Naruto realized that it wasn't enough to simply have power. He had to earn respect, not just through strength, but through his actions, through the way he cared for those around him. The Hokage title wasn't just about being the strongest. It was about being the heart of Konoha, the one who brought the village together. No matter how dark the days ahead might be, a figure approached from behind, and Naruto didn't need to turn to know who it was. Sakura, Naruto said without looking. Sakura sat beside him, her presence a comfort. I know what you're thinking, Naruto, she said softly. About Sasuke. You don't need to carry that weight alone. You got us. Remember? You got me. Naruto looked at her then, his eyes full of gratitude. Thanks, Sakura. I really mean it. You've been there for me through everything. And it means more than you know. She smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. I'll always be here for you, Naruto. No matter what happens with Sasuke. Or anyone else. You don't have to carry the burden of leadership alone. Not as Hokage. And not as a friend. Naruto's heart swelled with warmth at her words. She had always been there. Even when the world seemed against him. But now, as the Hokage-to-be, he couldn't help but feel that he was standing on the edge of something much bigger than just his own dreams. I won't let you down, Sakura, Naruto said, his voice steady. I promise. They sat there in silence for a while, watching the sunset together. There was something calming about the way the world seemed to slow down at that moment. As if even the universe was allowing Naruto a brief respite from the chaos that was his life. The next day, Naruto was in the training grounds, preparing himself for the challenges ahead. He was pushing his body to its limits, testing his newfound strength. The power of Garp, which had once felt so overwhelming, was now something he was learning to control. The raw, explosive energy that had once come so easily to him was now tempered with focus and discipline. He needed to be able to wield his power with precision, not recklessness. His muscles burned with exertion, but he didn't stop. Not now. Not when the future of Konoha depended on him. A loud thud interrupted his training as someone landed nearby, sending dust into the air. Naruto turned, recognizing the figure immediately. Lee? Naruto asked, a grin tugging at his lips. What's up? Lee stood with his usual enthusiasm, his face bright with determination. Naruto, I've heard of your progress. I've been waiting to see your new strength with my own eyes. Let's spar. I'll give it my all. Naruto chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. You sure you want to spar with me right now? Lee? I'm not really in the mood for easy fights. Lee's eyes sparkled with excitement. There is no such thing as an easy fight. I have trained hard and have learned much. It will be a worthy challenge. Naruto smirked, his competitive spirit rising. All right. Lee. You're on. The two took their positions, and Naruto could feel the familiar surge of adrenaline as Lee charged toward him with his usual speed and precision. But this time, Naruto wasn't caught off guard. He had become far more attuned to his own strength. With a single, effortless movement, Naruto dodged Lee's attack, his body fluid with the grace of someone who had transcended his former limits. Lee's eyes widened. Incredible. You've really grown stronger. Naruto's grin grew wider. I've got a lot more in store. But it's not just about power. Lee. I've got to learn how to use it the right way. The fight continued, each of them pushing the other to their limits. But as the sparring session wore on, Naruto felt something shift within himself. It wasn't just the physical challenge that was motivating him. It was the realization that his true strength lay in his ability to protect, to inspire, and to lead the people of Konoha. And no matter what, he would never stop fighting for them. As Naruto and Lee continued their sparring match, the energy between them shifted, becoming less about physical competition and more about understanding and respect. Lee, always brimming with enthusiasm, was pushing himself to his limits, while Naruto, now far more composed, matched him. Each dodge, each move showing the precision he had honed over the years. It wasn't about showing off his power. It was about understanding its value, about controlling it, and using it for the right purpose. Their fists collided, and Naruto, sensing Lee's growing fatigue, decided it was time to end the match. All right. Lee, Naruto said, his voice lighter than it had been moments ago. Let's call it. Lee, panting slightly, nodded in agreement. You've grown so much, Naruto. I never thought anyone could surpass me in speed. But you've done it. I have a lot to learn from you. Naruto smiled, placing a hand on Lee's shoulder. You've always been an inspiration, Lee. Your dedication is something I look up to. But I can't just rely on my power alone anymore. I've learned that it's not enough to be the strongest. I need to be a leader. I need to protect everyone, not just win fights. Lee, though still catching his breath, smiled back. Naruto, I believe you'll be an excellent Hokage. You're not just strong. You have the heart of a true leader. I know that you'll inspire everyone to follow you. The words of his friends, The ones who had always been there for him, rang in Naruto's ears. The support, the belief they had in him. It was overwhelming. And at the same time, it made him feel lighter, more capable. But as much as he knew they were right, a gnawing doubt still lingered in his mind. The path ahead was still unclear. Sasuke's cryptic words. The weight of becoming Hokage. It wasn't something that could be solved in one training session or one conversation. There was so much more to learn. So much more to face. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, Naruto walked back toward the Hokage office, deep in thought. The village, though peaceful on the surface, was still full of hidden challenges. The Akatsuki were still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. The fragile peace between the villages could shatter at any time. And Sasuke. Sasuke had always been a force that Naruto could never quite predict. When Naruto reached the Hokage office, Tsunade was already there, waiting for him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. The events of the day had left her deep in thought as well. "You've been busy," Tsunade said, leaning back in her chair as she motioned for Naruto to sit across from her. Naruto nodded as he took a seat. "Yeah. I had a spar with Lee earlier. He's as passionate as ever." Tsunade raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "And how did that go?" "Better than I expected," Naruto replied with a chuckle. "But it's not just about training anymore. Tsunade-sama. I'm not the same kid I was before. I've realized I need to be more than just a fighter. I need to be a symbol for Konoha. I need to be the kind of leader who can bring people together." Tsunade's eyes softened, but there was a quiet, contemplative weight to her gaze. "You're right. Leadership isn't just about power, Naruto. It's about trust, respect, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. And you have a lot to sacrifice. Being Hokage is about facing the impossible and making the right decision, no matter how difficult it may be. It's not just about being strong, it's about understanding when to fight and when to show mercy." Naruto clenched his fists, feeling the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. "I understand. I've made mistakes in the past. I thought strength was everything. But now, I know that leadership means more than just winning battles. It's about protecting Konoha. About protecting the people I care about." Tsunade gave him a small, approving smile. "I knew you were ready, Naruto. But remember, there will always be challenges, both from within and from outside Konoha. You will be tested in ways you cannot predict. And not everyone will understand your choices. But you have to trust in your heart, in your instincts." Naruto looked at her, his resolve hardening. "I'll make the right decisions. For Konoha. For the village. For everyone." Tsunade leaned forward slightly. "And don't forget, Naruto, you won't be alone. You have your friends, your comrades, your people. Lean on them when you need to. Even the Hokage can't carry the burden alone forever." Naruto nodded, his confidence growing with each word she spoke. He had always been driven by the need to prove himself, to show that he was worthy of the Hokage title. But now, he understood that leadership wasn't about proving his worth. It was about serving others, about putting their needs before his own. "Thank you, Tsunade-sama," Naruto said with a deep bow. "I won't forget your words." Tsunade's eyes softened further, and she gave him a small nod. "I know you won't." The following days were filled with a whirlwind of activity. As Naruto dove into his responsibilities, balancing the demands of the Hokage office with his growing need to train, he realized just how much was at stake. Every decision had weight. Every action had consequences. And while he had learned to control his immense power, he was now learning to control his emotions, his impulses, and his desires. Sasuke's words still echoed in his mind. He had come to test Naruto, to see if he was truly worthy of the strength he had gained. But what did that mean for their future? Sasuke wasn't the same person he had been when they were children. Naruto wasn't either. The Akatsuki were still out there, and Naruto knew they would come for him soon enough. But there was one thing that he was sure of. He was ready. He was more than ready. And no matter what, he would protect the village, his friends, and everyone he loved with all the power he had. As he stood at the Hokage monument, looking out over the village once more, Naruto clenched his fists, feeling the pulse of his chakra surge through him. The world ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear: he would face it with everything he had. And when the time came, he would stand firm against any challenge, not just as a fighter, but as a leader. A true Hokage. As the days passed, Naruto's understanding of his role as Hokage deepened. Every challenge he faced, whether administrative or personal, only served to strengthen his resolve. But the looming presence of the Akatsuki, Sasuke's cryptic warning, and the weight of his newfound responsibilities kept him on edge. Though he had grown stronger, mentally and physically, the road ahead wasn't as simple as just being the strongest. It was about finding the balance between power, compassion, and leadership. One morning, as the sun rose over Konoha, a messenger arrived at the Hokage office with an urgent message. Tsunade was already there, going through reports on recent missions, when the young ninja burst through the door. "Hokage-sama, there's been a disturbance in the village. The Akatsuki have been spotted near the borders." The messenger gasped, still catching his breath. Naruto's blood ran cold at the mention of the Akatsuki. He had known it was only a matter of time before they came for him. But hearing it now, hearing the urgency in the messenger's voice, made the threat feel all too real. Tsunade's expression hardened. "Send out a squad immediately to investigate. Keep it quiet for now, but make sure we have backup in place just in case." Naruto stood up, his muscles tensing as his instincts kicked in. "I'll go. I'm ready." Tsunade's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a silent exchange between them. She knew he had the power, but she also knew that this wasn't just about strength. The Akatsuki were a force to be reckoned with, and even though Naruto had grown immensely, there was still a world of difference between raw power and the calculated danger the Akatsuki posed. "Naruto," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You can't face them alone. We need to be strategic. We don't know how many there are or who is leading the group this time." Naruto's face was set in determination. "I won't be alone. I've got my friends, and I'll make sure Konoha stays safe." Tsunade took a deep breath, clearly torn between allowing Naruto to act on his instincts and making sure he understood the gravity of the situation. "All right, Naruto. But I'm assigning a team to go with you. You won't be going into this blindly." Naruto, Sakura, and a small squad of elite ninja were soon heading toward the borders of Konoha. The tension in the air palpable. The sight of the familiar village walls slowly receding into the distance made Naruto feel the weight of the moment even more. His mind raced with thoughts of Sasuke, of the Akatsuki, and of what the future might hold. This wasn't just another mission. This was a test of his strength, of his leadership, and of his ability to protect the people he loved. The further they traveled, the more Naruto could sense that something was wrong. The usual chirping of birds and rustling of leaves seemed absent. The air felt too still, too heavy. His senses, honed over years of training, were on high alert. They weren't far from the border when the first attack came. Out of the trees above them, a figure leapt down, landing with deadly precision. Naruto barely had time to react before the man spoke. "So, the Hokage's personal squad. How amusing," the stranger sneered, his voice dripping with malice. Sakura immediately dropped into a defensive stance, ready to fight. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure, tall and cloaked in black, his face obscured by a mask, chuckled darkly. "I am one of the Akatsuki. And you, little Konoha dogs, are the perfect prey." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "The Akatsuki? I thought you'd be more, well, dangerous." The figure's eyes flashed, and in an instant, he disappeared, leaving only a trail of wind. Naruto's instincts kicked in, and before anyone could blink, the figure reappeared behind Sakura, his kunai raised. Without hesitation, Naruto acted. His body moved before his mind could fully process it, and with a burst of speed, he slammed his fist into the ground. The shockwave of his punch rippled through the earth, sending the Akatsuki member crashing into a nearby tree. "Don't even think about it," Naruto said, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable sense of authority. He stood tall, his chakra flaring, his confidence unshakable. "You're not hurting anyone." The Akatsuki member slowly rose to his feet. His mask cracked slightly, revealing a pair of cold, calculating eyes. "So, you're the one they call the Hokage's chosen one. Impressive." He wiped the blood from his lip and sneered. "But you're nothing more than an obstacle in our way." Naruto cracked his knuckles, his expression unwavering. "Then let's see if you can back up your words." The battle began in earnest. Naruto's body moved with precision, every strike calculated but explosive. He could feel the power coursing through him. But this time, it was different. He wasn't just relying on brute force. He was using everything he had learned, the wisdom of his sensei, the trust of his comrades, and the lessons he had gained from his training. He was no longer just a ninja with a dream. He was the Hokage, and his duty was to protect the village at all costs. The Akatsuki member was fast, his jutsu designed for swift and deadly strikes. But Naruto was faster. His reaction time, heightened by the power of Garp, allowed him to anticipate the attacks before they happened. With each clash, he felt the weight of his responsibility, the burden of leadership, pressing down on him. Sakura, meanwhile, was already in the fray, throwing kunai and using her enhanced strength to disarm and disable their opponent. The rest of the squad was on high alert, surrounding the area, watching for any signs of reinforcements. Despite their combined efforts, the Akatsuki member seemed to have an endless supply of tricks. He was a master of misdirection and speed, darting in and out of the battle, always keeping them on their toes. But Naruto wasn't about to back down. He pushed his chakra even further, feeling the immense power in his body surge as he tapped into his inner reserves. His eyes flickered with a sense of determination. "You got some moves," Naruto said, his voice low. "But I'm not letting you leave here in one piece." With a roar, Naruto focused all his energy into one decisive strike. He dashed forward, faster than the Akatsuki member could react, and slammed a massive punch into his opponent's chest. The ground beneath them cracked, and the Akatsuki member was sent flying, crashing into the trees behind him. For a moment, there was silence. Sakura and the rest of the team approached cautiously, but Naruto remained where he was, eyes still trained on the motionless form of the Akatsuki member. The figure had stopped moving, and the aftermath of his defeat was clear. Naruto wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, his breath coming out in short gasps. "I'll admit, that was a good fight. But next time, don't bring any friends." Sakura looked at Naruto with admiration. "You really are stronger than I thought." Naruto. "But what now? Do you think that was the only one?" Naruto looked toward the horizon, his expression grim. "No, this is just the beginning." The battle against the Akatsuki member was just a taste of what Naruto knew lay ahead. He stood, still feeling the thrum of adrenaline in his veins, his chest heaving with each breath. He could hear the soft rustle of leaves as the wind picked up, a stark contrast to the intensity of the moment. Sakura stood beside him, her eyes filled with concern and admiration. She knew how powerful Naruto had become, but seeing him in action, truly understanding the depth of his strength, was a revelation. But there was no time for celebration. They couldn't afford to let their guard down. Naruto scanned the area, sensing any other presence that might linger in the shadows. The Akatsuki member was down, but Naruto knew they were only one small piece of a much larger puzzle. Sakura stepped forward, her eyes still on the fallen figure. "Naruto. Do you think there are more of them here?" Naruto's eyes narrowed as he surveyed their surroundings. "I don't know. But we need to be ready. If they're after me, they won't stop. Not until they get what they want." The rest of the squad had formed a perimeter, ready for any signs of movement. It was clear that Naruto's decision to step up as Hokage wasn't just about leading Konoha. It was about becoming a target. And the weight of that realization began to settle in. "Sakura. I want you to keep your guard up," Naruto said, his voice steady but laced with an intensity that reflected the new seriousness he felt. "The others will be back. We don't know when or where. But when they come, we need to be prepared to fight and protect the village." Sakura nodded firmly. "Understood. Let's not waste time. We'll handle whatever comes next." Naruto turned toward the fallen Akatsuki member, examining the figure. His cloak was torn in places, and his mask had been shattered by the force of Naruto's punch. Though the figure had been powerful, it seemed he hadn't expected Naruto to unleash the full extent of his strength. "This guy. He's not like the others," Naruto muttered, kneeling down beside the Akatsuki member. His aura. It's almost different. Sakura squatted next to him, examining the body. You think he was a scout? Or maybe just a distraction? Naruto stood, his gaze drifting to the distant trees, where the shadows seemed deeper, darker. His mind raced. If this was truly an Akatsuki mission, there had to be more to it. The fact that he had acted alone meant one of two things. Either they were testing the waters, or they were trying to lure him away from Konoha. Keep your distance from the body for now, Naruto ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. Something doesn't sit right about this. As his team followed his orders, Naruto's mind drifted back to the words Sasuke had spoken to him before. The warning about being tested. About the Akatsuki being more dangerous than he could imagine. Naruto clenched his fists, frustration bubbling up inside him. Sasuke, the one person who had always pushed him forward, was now like a shadow hanging over him. Naruto knew that he had changed, grown stronger, more capable, more responsible. But he also knew that, no matter how powerful he became, the world around him was constantly shifting. The Akatsuki wouldn't just fade into the background. They were out there, hunting him, watching his every move. But he wasn't going to run. No, not anymore. We need to get back to the village, Naruto said, looking toward the team. This is only the beginning. By the time they returned to Konoha, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of red and orange. The city, bustling with activity, seemed almost oblivious to the danger lurking beyond its borders. But Naruto could feel it. His instincts were on high alert, his mind constantly working, calculating the next move. As they entered the Hokage office, Tsunade was already there, pacing behind her desk, her face set in grim lines. She looked up as they entered, her gaze immediately landing on Naruto. Report, she said, her tone authoritative but tinged with concern. Naruto stepped forward, his posture straight, his expression hardening as he spoke. We ran into an Akatsuki member at the border. He was fast, probably an elite ninja, but nothing we couldn't handle. However, something about him felt off. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. Off how? Naruto looked down, considering his words carefully. It's hard to explain. His chakra felt different. Like he was stronger than he let on. But he wasn't giving it his all. He was testing us. There might be more of them out there, watching. Sakura, who had been standing behind him, nodded. He was too confident, too calculating. It didn't feel like a simple mission. Tsunade's fingers drummed on the desk. I see. I'll increase patrols along the borders and prepare a response team. We'll also send a reconnaissance team to look into any potential Akatsuki movements. Naruto shook his head, his frustration clear. No, I'll lead the team. I need to be the one to confront them. If they're coming after me, then I need to be the one to stop them. Tsunade looked at him, a mixture of admiration and caution in her eyes. You're not invincible, Naruto. We need to be strategic. I know my limits. Naruto cut her off, his voice steady but unwavering. But I'm not going to sit here and wait for them to make the first move. I'm ready for this. Tsunade sighed, clearly torn. She knew Naruto had grown powerful, more powerful than any Hokage before him. But there was still so much at stake. The Akatsuki weren't just rogue ninja. They were a force with plans that stretched across the entire world. If they could destroy Konoha, they would. And if they were after Naruto specifically, it was likely because of his connection to the Nine Tails. But Tsunade had seen the fire in his eyes. The same determination that had carried him through every trial, every obstacle. She knew she couldn't stop him. Not anymore. Fine, Tsunade said, finally conceding. But you'll have backup. We're not going in blind. We'll have a full team. And we'll make sure we have the intel we need before we move out. Naruto gave a nod of agreement. I'll be ready. The next morning, Naruto gathered his team. Sakura was by his side, as always, along with several high-ranking ninja, including Sai and Kakashi. Despite the gravity of the situation, there was a sense of quiet determination among them. They had faced down countless threats before. But the Akatsuki were something different. Naruto stood before them, his gaze sweeping over each of them. He had seen their strength, their resolve, and their loyalty. And now, he knew that, together, they could face whatever challenge lay ahead. "Listen up, everyone," Naruto said, his voice carrying the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. "The Akatsuki are after me. And they're not just going to stop because we want them to. We have to be ready for anything. I won't let them take Konoha. And I won't let them hurt anyone I care about. But we can't do this alone. We're a team. And that means we fight together. No matter what." The others nodded, their expressions serious but unwavering. "I'm with you, Naruto," Sakura said, her voice firm. "Let's end this." Kakashi stepped forward, his eyes behind his mask betraying a hint of pride. "We've got your back, Naruto. You're not alone in this." Naruto looked out over the team, feeling a surge of gratitude and strength. This was his village. These were his people. And no matter what the future held, he would protect them with everything he had. With that, the team set off toward the border once more, the weight of the world resting on Naruto's shoulders. He could feel the danger in the air, could almost taste the coming conflict. But he also felt something else. The burning fire of determination. The resolve of a leader who would do anything to protect those he loved. The Akatsuki were coming. And Naruto was ready. As the team moved swiftly through the dense forest surrounding Konoha, Naruto's thoughts were focused. The forest around them was eerily quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustling of leaves as the wind blew through the trees. It felt almost too quiet, like the calm before a storm. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Akatsuki were watching, waiting, planning. He had to stay one step ahead, not just for himself, but for everyone he cared about. Sakura, walking beside him, noticed the tension in his posture. "You're thinking about the Akatsuki again, aren't you?" she asked, her voice quiet but direct. Naruto glanced at her, his eyes flicking to hers for a moment before looking ahead. "Yeah. I can't help it. I know they're out there. And they won't stop until they get what they want. I need to be ready for whatever they throw at me." Sakura's lips pressed into a thin line. But she didn't argue. She understood the weight he carried. It wasn't just about his power. It was about the lives of those in Konoha. He'd always carried the burden of protecting his village. But now, with the Akatsuki targeting him specifically, that responsibility felt heavier than ever. As they continued, Sai, who had been walking a little ahead, turned to glance at them. His expression was unreadable, as usual, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Naruto, have you noticed anything unusual about this mission so far?" Naruto narrowed his eyes, his senses heightening as he searched the area around them. "What do you mean?" Sai gestured to the trees and the path ahead. "The atmosphere. It feels off. There's no sign of animals. No birds flying overhead. It's too quiet." Naruto's instincts immediately flared. "You're right. Something's not right. They've been waiting for us. Everyone, keep your guard up." Kakashi's voice cut in, his tone laced with quiet authority. He had been trailing behind the group, his Sharingan eye scanning their surroundings. "There are no signs of traps. But I agree with Sai. Something's off. Stay alert." Just as Kakashi finished speaking, a dark shadow darted across the path ahead. It was so fast that it was barely perceptible to the naked eye. But Naruto's enhanced senses caught it immediately. His body tensed, chakra rising in preparation. "Ambush!" Naruto shouted. Before anyone could react, several figures dropped from the trees, their presence now fully revealed. They were cloaked in black, their faces hidden behind masks. The unmistakable insignia of the Akatsuki was visible on each of their cloaks, and Naruto's heart sank. The real battle was about to begin. Naruto Uzumaki, the so-called Hokage, one of the figures spoke, his voice cold and emotionless. "We've come for you. The time has come to end this farce." Naruto stepped forward, his eyes hardening. "You think you can just waltz into my village and take me down?" "Not happening." The Akatsuki member chuckled darkly. "You've grown stronger. But you are still a child playing at being a leader. You will fall like the rest of them." The tension in the air was thick. And the rest of Naruto's team immediately spread out, preparing for the inevitable fight. The leader of the Akatsuki group, a tall man with silver hair and piercing red eyes, stepped forward. "Enough talking. Show us what you're truly capable of, Hokage, the leader said, his voice like a blade. Naruto cracked his knuckles, the chakra in his body swirling in preparation. You wanted a fight? You got one. Without warning, Naruto launched himself into the air, his body moving faster than any of the Akatsuki members could react. He landed in front of the group with a powerful crash, his fist raised. The ground beneath him cracked from the sheer force of his landing, and his eyes blazed with determination. I don't care who you are or what you want, Naruto growled. I'm not backing down. Not now. Not ever. The Akatsuki members exchanged glances, seemingly unfazed by his words. They had seen his strength before, but they were confident in their abilities. They were the ones who had taken down entire villages, and one man, no matter how strong, was not enough to stop them. The silver-haired leader raised his hand. Attack! At his command, the Akatsuki members sprang into action, each one moving with deadly precision. Naruto barely had time to react as the first wave of attacks came at him. Kunai and shuriken flying through the air. With a flash of movement, he dodged the projectiles, his body twisting and spinning as he avoided each one with ease. Not bad, Naruto muttered under his breath as he surveyed the approaching enemy. But you'll need more than that to take me down. The first Akatsuki member, a tall woman with long black hair, rushed toward Naruto with incredible speed. She moved like a shadow, her kunai raised in an attempt to strike at his chest. But Naruto was faster. He met her head-on, his fist connecting with her midsection in a powerful punch. The impact sent her flying back, crashing into the ground with a thud. But she quickly recovered, a cruel smile on her face. You're strong, Hokage, she said with a mocking tone. But not strong enough. Naruto's eyes narrowed. You haven't even begun to see my strength. Before she could react, Naruto launched himself into another series of moves. His fists were a blur of motion, each one landing with bone-crushing force. With each strike, he could feel the weight of his power. But he knew it wasn't enough. He needed to end this quickly before the Akatsuki had a chance to regroup. Sakura, Sai, and Kakashi were already engaged with the other members, their teamwork seamless and efficient. Kakashi's Sharingan allowed him to predict their movements, while Sakura's strength shattered the ground beneath her with each punch. Sai used his ink jutsu to create deadly weapons, launching them with deadly accuracy. But Naruto had his sights set on the leader of the group. He knew that taking down their commander would throw the rest of the Akatsuki into disarray. With a fierce shout, he charged forward, his body surging with chakra. The air crackled around him as he prepared to unleash one of his most devastating attacks. The Akatsuki leader met his charge with a twisted grin. So, you've decided to play your hand. Let's see if you can back up your talk. Naruto's fist shot forward, aiming directly for the leader's chest. The Akatsuki leader moved at the last moment, his body blurring with speed. The punch missed by inches, and in that moment, the leader counterattacked. A wave of dark chakra enveloped his body as he raised his hand, summoning a massive blast of energy aimed directly at Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized the magnitude of the attack. He couldn't dodge it. Not in time. But then, something inside him shifted. The power that had lain dormant within him surged to the surface. With a roar, he threw himself forward, his body surrounded by a golden aura of chakra. The blast collided with him. But instead of pushing him back, Naruto absorbed the energy, his body glowing with the intensity of the blast. The Akatsuki leader's eyes widened in disbelief. What is this? Naruto's grin was feral. You wanted to see my strength? Here it is. With a mighty roar, Naruto's chakra exploded outward, the shockwave rippling through the forest. The force of the blast sent the Akatsuki leader flying backward, crashing into the trees with an earth-shaking impact. The rest of the Akatsuki members hesitated, clearly stunned by the display of raw power. Naruto's breath came in deep, ragged gasps. But his resolve was unshaken. This is just the beginning. You Akatsuki bastards. You'll regret ever coming after me. The fight wasn't over. But Naruto had proven one thing. No matter what they threw at him, he would always rise above it. The air around them was charged with an oppressive silence. The trees, once alive with the sounds of nature, now stood motionless as the remnants of Naruto's explosive chakra spread outward, a visible distortion in the air. The remaining Akatsuki members stared at him in stunned disbelief, their eyes wide, calculating, and, for the first time since the fight began, cautious. Naruto stood tall in the center of the battlefield, his body brimming with an energy that was almost tangible. His hair, usually spiked and wild, seemed to shimmer with an ethereal glow, and his once youthful features now carried the weight of the Hokage's responsibility. His eyes, however, never wavered. He was not just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Konoha, for his comrades, and for everything he had worked so hard to protect. Kakashi, Sai, and Sakura were taking advantage of the brief lull to regroup, their faces grim but resolute. It was clear that the battle was far from over, but Naruto's overwhelming display of power had given them a moment to breathe. The leader of the Akatsuki, still struggling to recover from the force of Naruto's chakra, was the first to break the silence. He rose slowly from the wreckage of the trees, his once confident posture now showing signs of wariness. You are far stronger than we anticipated, the Akatsuki leader muttered, his voice tinged with grudging respect. But don't think this will be enough to defeat us, Hokage. Naruto's lip curled into a smirk. You think I'm done? I'm just getting started. The Akatsuki leader's eyes narrowed, and he made a subtle gesture. The remaining members of his group spread out, their stances shifting, preparing for the next phase of the battle. Each one had a unique ability, a different weapon at their disposal, and Naruto knew that each of them was a potential threat. Sakura, Sai, and Kakashi formed a defensive perimeter around Naruto, the four of them standing shoulder to shoulder as they faced the Akatsuki. Their movements were synchronized, an unspoken trust binding them together as they braced for the next wave. We can't let them get the upper hand, Sakura said quietly, her eyes scanning the enemies around them. We need to take them out quickly. Naruto nodded. I'll take the leader. You guys handle the rest. If we can take him down, the rest of them will scatter. Kakashi's eye glinted behind his mask. We'll do our best, Naruto. But don't let your guard down. They're not the type to go down without a fight. Without warning, the Akatsuki leader raised his hand again, and the remaining members of his group moved forward. The forest seemed to close in around them as the battle erupted once more. The first Akatsuki member, a tall man with spiky red hair and a black cloak, moved toward Sai, his eyes glowing with malice. He wasn't as fast as Naruto, but his jutsu made him dangerous in his own right. Sai responded with quick, precise brush strokes, summoning his ink clones to fend off the man's attacks. The clones exploded on contact, but the Akatsuki member was relentless, pressing forward. Sakura moved toward the woman who had initially engaged Naruto, her fists crackling with chakra. The woman's kunai glinted in the dim light, but Sakura's enhanced strength shattered each of her strikes, the force behind each punch capable of breaking bone. Still, the Akatsuki woman was quick and agile, evading most of Sakura's attacks with a series of flips and spins. Meanwhile, Kakashi faced off against a dark-skinned man with a gaunt face, whose movements were sharp and unpredictable. Kakashi's Sharingan flickered, tracking the man's every move as he used his lightning jutsu to counter the Akatsuki member's attacks. The crackle of electricity filled the air as their techniques collided, a battle of speed and strategy unfolding before Naruto's eyes. Naruto, however, had his eyes locked onto the leader of the Akatsuki. The man was still recovering from the previous explosion of chakra, but his eyes burned with a cold fury. The leader's lips twisted into a dark smile. Foolish, the leader said, his voice low and dangerous. You have no idea what you're up against. With a sudden motion, he raised his hand, and the air around them seemed to warp. A dark energy pulsed from his body, and Naruto instinctively braced himself. The energy was unlike anything he had felt before, a sickening, consuming force that seemed to suck the life from the very surroundings. But Naruto wasn't afraid. He had felt similar forces before. This man's power was immense, but it wasn't unbeatable. With a roar, Naruto surged forward, his fist raised high. He used his chakra to propel himself with explosive speed, closing the distance between him and the Akatsuki leader in the blink of an eye. The leader's eyes widened in surprise. But he wasn't unprepared. He raised his hand to meet Naruto's punch, summoning a shield of dark energy to block the blow. The collision was deafening. Naruto's punch slammed into the shield with a force that shook the ground beneath them. But the dark energy surrounding the leader absorbed much of the impact. However, Naruto's chakra roared louder, pushing through the shield's defenses, crackling with the force of 1,000 storms. Not enough, the leader muttered, his expression shifting from shock to determination. He raised both hands, unleashing a powerful wave of dark energy. The blast engulfed the area between them, a torrent of chakra that seemed to twist and distort everything in its path. Naruto gritted his teeth, but he didn't retreat. He clenched his fists and, with all his might, met the attack head-on. His body flared with golden chakra, a barrier of raw energy that crackled as it absorbed the leader's blast. For a moment, it seemed like they were locked in an impossible struggle, the forces colliding, each side pushing for dominance. But Naruto had one advantage the Akatsuki leader didn't: his resolve. The longer they fought, the more Naruto's power surged, each moment pushing him to his limits. He wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting for everything: his friends, his village, his future. With a mighty cry, Naruto unleashed all of his chakra, a massive shockwave rippling outward, pushing the Akatsuki leader back. The dark energy dissipated, and the Akatsuki leader staggered, finally falling to his knees. "I won't lose to you," the leader hissed. But Naruto wasn't finished yet. Naruto took a deep breath, his body still alight with chakra, and focused. He needed to finish this. In a blur of motion, Naruto appeared in front of the Akatsuki leader, his fist rising one last time. The leader didn't even have time to react before Naruto's punch connected, a devastating blow that sent the Akatsuki member flying backward into the trees. He hit the ground with a bone-rattling crash, his body lifeless. The battlefield fell silent once more, the remaining Akatsuki members frozen in shock. They had underestimated Naruto. They had come thinking that he was just another Hokage, a symbol of leadership, but nothing more. But now, they saw the true depth of his power. Naruto stood, his breathing heavy, but his expression unwavering. He turned to face the rest of his team, who were finishing off the remaining Akatsuki members, their strength and coordination ensuring that no one was left standing. Kakashi, his face set in a rare smile, gave a small nod of approval. "You did it, Naruto." Sakura, wiping blood from her forehead, smiled as well. "You're amazing." Sai, always the quiet one, simply nodded in agreement. Naruto's eyes softened, and a tired but genuine smile spread across his face. "We did it. Together." But even as they took a moment to catch their breath, Naruto knew this wasn't over. The Akatsuki might be defeated for now, but they were only one part of a much larger threat. The real battle was still ahead. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive, and filled with the lingering echo of the battle. As the Akatsuki members lay defeated in the dirt and shattered trees, their once menacing presence reduced to a hollow memory. Naruto could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His body still buzzed with the intense chakra he had unleashed, but beneath the fatigue was a sense of deep satisfaction. He wiped the sweat from his brow and turned to look at his comrades. Kakashi, his mask slightly lifted to show a rare, approving smile, met Naruto's gaze. Sakura was panting heavily but had that look of fierce determination on her face. She was always the heart of their team. And Sai, his usual stoic expression betraying nothing, nodded in acknowledgement. "Is everyone okay?" Naruto asked, his voice rough from exertion, though his concern for his team was clear. Kakashi was the first to respond, his tone as calm as ever. "We're fine, Naruto. You did most of the work, as usual." Sakura gave him a tired but genuine smile. "We couldn't have done it without you. You really showed them what it means to mess with Konoha." Sai, his sharp eyes scanning the fallen enemies, spoke next. "We should gather intel before moving forward. We still don't know their full plan." Naruto nodded in agreement. He knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. They had just defeated a group of high-ranking Akatsuki members, but the organization was vast, and their leader, Pain, was still out there, as dangerous as ever. This victory was significant, but it was only one battle in a much larger war. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again, Naruto said, his tone serious now. Let's not leave any stone unturned. They took a moment to inspect the bodies of the fallen Akatsuki members, collecting anything of value. They found a few scrolls with cryptic symbols and coded messages, which Sai quickly tucked away for later analysis. There was also a strange, jagged kunai that seemed to have been enchanted with dark chakra. Kakashi carefully examined it, his brow furrowed. Be cautious with this, Kakashi advised. This might be tied to their rituals or weapons. It's not just any ordinary kunai. Naruto's eyes darkened. This isn't over, is it? No, Kakashi replied, his voice grave. This is just the beginning. They've seen your power, Naruto. This will only make them more determined. Sakura's eyes flicked to the distance, her expression thoughtful. And there's the matter of their true goal. They weren't just here for a fight. Naruto clenched his fists. They were after me. But why? What's their real game? The answer came as a whisper in the back of Naruto's mind. A feeling he couldn't shake. It was the same feeling he had when they first attacked. The Akatsuki's motives ran deeper than just capturing him. They wanted to provoke him, push him to his limits, and that, he realized, was their true strategy. They want to break me, Naruto muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? They know how much Konoha means to me. How much my friends and the people I protect mean to me, Naruto said, his voice quiet but filled with an unmistakable intensity. If they can break me, they can break Konoha. Sakura stepped forward, her face full of determination. They won't break you, Naruto. Not as long as we're here with you. Naruto smiled, though it was tinged with the weight of understanding. Yeah, I know. But it's not just about Konoha. This is about everyone. Every village. They want to bring us all down. And we can't let that happen. Sai nodded thoughtfully, his usual reserve replaced by a flicker of empathy. Then we need to be prepared. This victory might have been significant, but the war is still ahead of us. Kakashi looked to the horizon, his gaze distant. We'll need reinforcements. We should return to Konoha and prepare for what's coming next. This will only get worse. Naruto felt the shift in the air, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The battle was over, but the war was far from it. With the Akatsuki's attention focused on him, Naruto couldn't afford to rest. There were more threats on the horizon, and each step they took would bring them closer to the heart of the enemy's plan. Let's head back, Naruto said, his voice firm, the weight of his words carrying the gravity of the mission ahead. But we're not done. Not by a long shot. The team began to move, heading back toward Konoha, their pace steady and determined. The battle in the forest may have ended, but they knew this was just one chapter in a much larger story. Naruto's mind raced as he thought about the future. He would need to gather information, prepare Konoha's defenses, and ready himself for whatever the Akatsuki had in store. They walked in silence for a time, each lost in their thoughts. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale glow over the path ahead. The stillness of the night was a stark contrast to the chaos of the battle they had just fought. Yet in that silence, Naruto could feel the quiet strength of his comrades beside him. They were a team, and as long as they stood together, there was nothing they couldn't face. Sakura spoke first, breaking the silence. You know, Naruto, it's hard to believe how much you've changed. You used to be that kid who just wanted to prove himself. Now, you're the one leading the charge. Naruto chuckled, though the sound was more reflective than his usual carefree laugh. Yeah. I guess I've come a long way. Huh? I didn't even think I could be Hokage, let alone lead a team like this. But here we are. Sai's usual monotone voice cut through the moment. You're stronger than any of us thought, Naruto. Even I have to admit, I underestimated you. Naruto turned to look at him, a teasing grin on his face. What? You thought I was just a loudmouth with no real power? Sai gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Something like that. But you've proven me wrong. We all underestimated you. Yeah. Well, Naruto said, his tone lightening as he rubbed the back of his head. "I've got a lot more to show." Kakashi looked over at them, his expression unreadable as ever. But his eyes softened just a bit. "You've always had the potential, Naruto. It just took the right circumstances to bring it out." Naruto's gaze hardened again, his focus shifting back to their mission. "Well, whatever the circumstances, I'm not going to stop. I'll protect everyone. I'll protect Konoha and the whole world if I have to. I'll do whatever it takes to stop the Akatsuki." Kakashi nodded solemnly, acknowledging the weight of Naruto's words. "We'll be with you every step of the way. Together, we can take them down." The path ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Naruto wasn't alone in this fight. The strength of his friends, his team, his village, this was what would keep him going. He had come a long way. And though the journey ahead would be filled with danger and uncertainty, Naruto knew one thing for sure. He would never give up. Not now. Not ever. And as they approached the outskirts of Konoha, the village in the distance shining in the moonlight, Naruto's heart burned with renewed resolve. The real battle was still ahead, and he would be ready. As the group approached the gates of Konoha, the familiar sight of their village under the soft glow of the moonlight filled Naruto with a sense of quiet reassurance. Despite the weight of the battles that lay ahead, there was something about returning home that brought a measure of peace. The streets were still, the village seemingly at rest for the night, unaware of the battle that had just raged on the outskirts. Naruto looked over at his comrades, Kakashi, Sakura, and Sai, and felt a surge of gratitude for their unwavering support. Each of them had contributed to the victory in their own way, but it was clear that this time, it was his power, his resolve, that had made the difference. "Let's head to the Hokage's office," Naruto said, his voice resolute. "We need to report in and make sure everyone's prepared. The Akatsuki will be after us again soon. They won't give up that easily." Kakashi nodded, his usual calm demeanor never wavering. "Right. We need to make sure the village is ready for whatever comes next." As they walked through the village, Naruto's mind raced with thoughts of their next moves. The Akatsuki had seen his power now. He knew they wouldn't simply retreat. No, they'd regroup, adapt, and come back stronger. Just like they always did. But this time, it would be different. This time, he would be ready. They reached the Hokage's office without incident, the familiar stone building towering above them. The large doors opened with a soft creak, and the team stepped inside. Tsunade, the fifth Hokage, was seated at her desk, her eyes tired but sharp as ever. She looked up as they entered, her gaze sweeping over them. "Report," Tsunade commanded, her voice a mix of concern and authority. Naruto stepped forward, giving her a quick, concise rundown of the events that had just transpired. He didn't leave out any details: how the Akatsuki had attacked, how he'd unleashed his full power, and how they had managed to defeat the majority of the group. He also mentioned the strange kunai they had found and the ominous feeling it gave him. When he finished, Tsunade was silent for a long moment. Her sharp gaze never left him, as if weighing something in her mind. Finally, she leaned forward, her fingers steepled in front of her. "You're right to be concerned," Tsunade said, her tone grim. "This fight was a victory. But it's clear that the Akatsuki are playing a much longer game. They want to test your limits, Naruto. They want to break you. Not just through force, but through everything you hold dear." Naruto nodded, understanding all too well. The Akatsuki knew what drove him, the people he cared about, the village he swore to protect. They would exploit that weakness if they could, twist it into something to use against him. "They're dangerous," Sakura said, her voice firm. "But we'll fight back. We won't let them win." Tsunade's eyes softened slightly, and she gave a small, approving nod. "I know you will. But this is no longer just about individual battles. The Akatsuki are moving in a coordinated effort, and they're after something bigger than just you, Naruto. We need to gather intel on their next move. But we can't do it alone." Sai stepped forward, his usual expression unreadable, but his voice was serious. "I'll continue gathering information. I have contacts outside the village who might be able to shed light on their plans. We'll leave no stone unturned." Tsunade gave him a brief nod, clearly appreciating his commitment. "Good. But be careful. Sigh. The Akatsuki will be watching for any sign of weakness. If they know we're onto them, they'll act. Kakashi added, his voice low but steady. I'll take charge of strengthening Konoha's defenses. We need to be ready for a direct assault. And it's only a matter of time before they strike again. Naruto clenched his fists, the weight of the situation settling on him once more. He could feel the pressure of being Hokage, the responsibility of protecting his village, his friends, and everyone he loved. It wasn't just about strength, it was about strategy, unity, and foresight. The Akatsuki had shown they were willing to do whatever it took to break him. But he wasn't about to let them succeed. Tsunade looked at him then, her eyes calculating but compassionate. Naruto, you've grown stronger. But strength alone won't be enough to defeat them. You'll need allies, not just power. Naruto looked up at her, his gaze unwavering. I know. And I'm not going to do this alone. I've got you all with me. Sakura, standing by his side, smiled. We're with you, Naruto. Always? Sai nodded in agreement, though his usual quietness remained. Together, we can overcome them. Kakashi, his eye glinting with a rare pride, added, we're all in this together. You don't have to carry this burden alone. Naruto's chest swelled with a sense of pride and determination. These were his friends, his family. Together, they could face anything, even the looming threat of the Akatsuki. Tsunade gave a final, heavy sigh. All right. We need to move quickly. Gather the village's top shinobi and begin fortifying the defenses. If the Akatsuki plan on attacking Konoha directly, we need to be ready. Naruto, you'll need to continue training and improving your skills. But more importantly, you need to stay grounded. Don't let your power overwhelm you. The moment you lose control is the moment they'll strike. Naruto nodded solemnly, his mind racing. He understood the weight of her words. His power had grown exponentially. But with that strength came a danger. His own potential for destruction. He couldn't let that power consume him. Not now. Not when everything was at stake. I won't lose control, Naruto said quietly. I've worked too hard for this. I won't let them win. Tsunade gave him a measured look, her eyes softer than before. Good. Because this fight isn't just about fighting the Akatsuki. It's about who you are, Naruto. The Hokage leads not just with strength, but with wisdom, with compassion, and with the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. I believe in you. Don't forget that. Naruto met her gaze, his resolve hardening once more. I won't forget. With that, the meeting broke up, and the team went to work. Sai set off to gather more information, using his network of spies and informants to piece together the Akatsuki's next moves. Kakashi and Sakura began organizing the village's defenses, ensuring that the shinobi were prepared for whatever came next. Tsunade began the task of rallying the higher-ranking officials and strategists to bolster their position. Naruto, meanwhile, found himself standing at the edge of the Hokage building, staring out over the village. The night had grown deeper, the streets below quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves. He felt the weight of the entire village's hopes and dreams on his shoulders. But he didn't flinch. He was ready. He had come a long way from the boy who had once craved recognition. Now, he didn't need that anymore. He had his friends. He had his village. And he had the strength to protect them. No matter what came next, he would face it head on. Because that was what a Hokage did. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of a shadow behind him. He turned to see Kakashi standing there, his usual calm demeanor present. You've come a long way, Naruto, Kakashi said, his voice soft but filled with meaning. Naruto smiled. Yeah, I guess I have. But the road ahead isn't easy. Not by a long shot. Kakashi's smile was small but genuine. We'll walk it together. And you won't have to carry the weight alone. Naruto's heart warmed at the words. He wasn't alone. And with his friends by his side, he would face whatever challenges awaited him. Together, they would defeat the Akatsuki. Together, they would protect Konoha and everyone they cared about. Thanks, Kakashi. Naruto said quietly. I won't forget that. And as the night stretched on, the resolve in Naruto's heart burned brighter than ever. The battle wasn't over. It was only just beginning. As Naruto stood there, overlooking the village, He could feel the weight of the future pressing in on him. The calmness of the night was deceptive. Everything seemed peaceful. But he knew that peace was fragile. The Akatsuki were out there. And they had seen his power. They would be back. And next time, they wouldn't hold back. He had to be ready. Kakashi's footsteps echoed lightly behind him as he took a step closer. "I know what you're thinking, Naruto," Kakashi said. His voice measured. "You're already preparing for the next battle. But remember, you can't do everything by yourself." Naruto turned slightly, a wry smile playing on his lips. "I know, Kakashi. But when it comes to protecting Konoha, I don't want to leave anything to chance." Kakashi looked up at the stars for a moment, his hand resting on the railing next to Naruto. "I get it. But even the strongest shinobi need others to back them up. You can't take on the entire world by yourself. That's why we're here." Naruto felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. It wasn't just the power he had gained that made him strong, it was the people around him. It was his friends. His comrades. They were his true strength. "I won't forget that," Naruto said, turning fully to face Kakashi. "We'll take them down together." Kakashi's smile was small but genuine. "Good. That's the spirit I like to see." For a moment, they stood there in comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts about the future. Kakashi's words were a reminder that while Naruto had grown stronger, there was still much to learn. But it wasn't just strength in battle he needed. It was wisdom, humility, and the understanding that leadership was more than just fighting. It was about uniting others and leading them with a steady hand. "You're still thinking about the Akatsuki, aren't you?" Kakashi asked, breaking the silence once again. Naruto nodded. "I can't help it. They're going to come for us again. They won't stop until they get what they want. And I can't afford to be caught off guard." Kakashi's expression softened, the usual seriousness replaced by something warmer. "Naruto, we've been through a lot together. And you've grown in ways I never expected. But remember, it's okay to trust others with the responsibility. You don't have to carry everything alone." Naruto chuckled lightly. "You're sounding like a Hokage yourself." Kakashi. Kakashi smiled faintly, his eye crinkling with amusement. "Maybe I'm just getting old." Naruto laughed, the sound light and carefree. But there was an underlying tension in his chest that he couldn't shake. The reality of the battle ahead hung heavy in the air. The Akatsuki were out there, planning their next move. And Naruto knew they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. "I'll take that advice to heart," Naruto said, his voice serious again. "But I still need to train. There's more I can do to get stronger. The power I've unlocked. I can feel there's more to it. More I haven't even scratched the surface of." Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "You think you can go beyond this power?" Naruto nodded, his gaze distant, as if visualizing something beyond the here and now. "I have to. The Akatsuki are going to push me to my limits, and I can't afford to hold anything back. If I want to protect everyone, I need to be stronger than I am now." Kakashi regarded him carefully for a moment. "You're still young, Naruto. Your growth has been remarkable. But remember that strength isn't just about raw power. It's about control. About understanding the full extent of what you can do, and what you can't do." Naruto smiled at that, the tension in his body easing a little. "Yeah, I get it. I can't just go charging in without a plan. I've got to be smart about it. I'll learn to control this power. I'm going to master it." Kakashi clapped him on the shoulder, a small but approving gesture. "That's the spirit. You got the determination, Naruto. Just make sure you don't lose yourself in the process." "I won't," Naruto promised, his voice firm. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. As Kakashi had said, there was no time to waste. Naruto focused on training with his newfound abilities, pushing himself to the limits and beyond. He spent hours meditating, trying to understand the deeper layers of the power that had awakened inside him. It wasn't easy. The power he had unlocked was vast and untapped, and it required discipline, patience, and an unrelenting drive to push beyond his limits. During his training, he encountered moments of doubt. There were times when he felt the weight of it all, the pressure of being the one everyone relied on, the responsibility of the village, his friends, and all the people he cared about. But with each day, that doubt faded. He knew he wasn't alone. Kakashi, Sakura, Sai, They were with him. They would help him shoulder the burden. The first real test came sooner than expected. Naruto had just finished a particularly grueling session of training. His body exhausted but his mind sharper than ever. When word arrived that a small Akatsuki faction had been spotted near the village's border, the team sprang into action, ready to confront the threat. Kakashi gathered their group quickly. "Naruto, stay focused," he said. "This could be a reconnaissance mission. We need to see what they're after." "I know," Naruto replied, his eyes already locked on the horizon. "But I'm not letting them slip away this time." The air around them was tense as they made their way to the village's outer defenses. The night was darker than before, and the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long. The Akatsuki, Naruto knew, wouldn't waste time with games. They would go straight for the heart of the village if they could. The group approached the forest at the edge of Konoha, moving quietly through the trees. They were close now. The Akatsuki had been spotted just beyond the clearing, and Naruto could sense the familiar, malevolent presence that clung to them like a second skin. Naruto took a deep breath, focusing his senses. He could feel his chakra flowing through his body, every fiber of his being vibrating with energy. It was a power that he was learning to control, a power that surged through him and yet demanded his full attention. "Stay alert," Kakashi whispered as they reached the clearing. There, standing in the middle of the open space, were two Akatsuki members. Their faces were hidden by the cloaks, but Naruto could feel their presence, cold, calculating, and dangerous. "Looks like they're not here for a chat," Sai murmured, his fingers already curling around his ink pen, preparing for a fight. Naruto took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. This time, he wouldn't hold back. He had to show them that Konoha was not to be trifled with. "You think you can attack my village and get away with it?" Naruto called out, his voice loud and firm. The two Akatsuki members turned toward him, their eyes glowing with dark intent. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man, grinned, his voice cold and mocking. "You think you're strong enough to stop us, boy?" Naruto's eyes hardened, and the air around him seemed to shift. The familiar power that had once felt like an overwhelming burden now felt like a force he could control. He stepped forward again, the ground beneath him cracking slightly as his chakra flared. "I'll show you how strong I am," Naruto said, his voice a promise of destruction. "I'll make you regret ever stepping foot in Konoha." The battle had begun. This time, Naruto wouldn't hold back. The moment Naruto's words hung in the air, the tension in the clearing thickened. His chakra surged around him like a wild storm, causing the wind to pick up and whip through the trees. His body radiated an energy that felt almost overwhelming. He was ready to show them that the village he swore to protect was not to be underestimated. The two Akatsuki members exchanged a glance, an almost amused look crossing their faces. They weren't afraid, not yet. But there was something in Naruto's eyes that made them pause. They could feel the power radiating off him, like the pressure of an impending storm. One of them, a lanky man with a pale face, stepped forward, his voice dark and mocking. "You're nothing but a child with power you don't understand. The Akatsuki will take what we want, no matter how strong you think you've become." Naruto's fist clenched. He had no time for their arrogance. The Akatsuki had been targeting Konoha for too long, and they were done underestimating him. Without another word, Naruto pushed off the ground, launching himself at the two men. His speed was a blur, his movements fast enough to leave an afterimage in the air. The ground beneath him cracked under the force of his leap, a display of raw power as he closed the distance. The Akatsuki member on the left, a tall, broad-shouldered man with an intimidating presence, acted first, his hands making swift seals. "Fire style. Fireball jutsu," he roared, unleashing a massive blast of flame directly toward Naruto. But Naruto was already in motion, his reflexes sharper than ever. As the fireball hurtled toward him, he slammed his hands to the ground, focusing his chakra. "Earth style. Earth wall," he shouted, a massive barrier of rock rising up from the ground in front of him, blocking the flames. The fireball slammed into the wall, exploding with force. But Naruto's defense held strong, not even a crack forming on the surface. "Is that all you've got?" Naruto sneered, his voice dripping with confidence. He was no longer the boy who had struggled with his strength. He had grown. He had learned. The broad-shouldered man's eyes widened with a flicker of surprise. But he didn't hesitate. He charged forward, his fists swinging with the force of a wrecking ball. He moved fast, his strength terrifying. But Naruto was faster. Too slow. Naruto grinned as he dodged the incoming blow with ease, the man's fist missing him by mere inches. He retaliated instantly, his fist shooting out in a blinding motion. Rasengan. The ball of spiraling chakra formed in his palm, crackling with immense power. Without giving the Akatsuki member a chance to react, Naruto drove the Rasengan into his stomach with explosive force. The impact sent the man flying backward, his body crashing into a tree with enough force to leave a crater where he landed. The man groaned but slowly started to stand, clearly stunned by the power of Naruto's attack. Blood trickled down his chin, but there was no mistaking the intensity in his eyes now. Naruto wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Before the man could regain his footing, Naruto's eyes flicked to the other Akatsuki member, the lanky, pale-faced man who had been watching from the sidelines. A smirk danced on his lips as he raised his hands, preparing his own attack. "You think you've won? You don't know what we're capable of," the pale-faced man hissed. "You'll regret underestimating the Akatsuki." "Save it," Naruto shot back, his tone sharp. "I've heard enough of your threats." In the blink of an eye, Naruto closed the distance, his fist cocked back and ready to strike. The Akatsuki member's eyes widened in alarm. But before he could react, Naruto's fist connected with his chest in a devastating punch, sending him flying backward. The Akatsuki member gasped, the air knocked from his lungs. But before he could recover, Naruto was on top of him. He slammed his foot into the ground, creating a shockwave of chakra that sent the man skidding across the clearing. "You think I'm just going to let you walk away from this?" Naruto growled, his voice low and dangerous. The Akatsuki member gritted his teeth, attempting to rise, but he was clearly struggling. "You're stronger than we expected. But it doesn't matter. You won't stop the Akatsuki. Our plan is already in motion." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "I don't care about your plan. I care about protecting my village. And if you try to hurt anyone I love, I'll make sure you regret it." As the words left his mouth, the air around him seemed to vibrate with intensity. He was on the verge of losing himself, the surge of power coursing through him threatening to burst beyond control. But Naruto gritted his teeth, focusing on the task at hand. He couldn't let the anger take over. Not now. Just as he prepared to finish off the two men, a shadow appeared in the distance, drawing their attention. "Naruto, stop!" A voice called out. It was Kakashi, leading Sakura and Side toward the clearing. Naruto turned to see them, their presence a welcome reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. Kakashi's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to Naruto's intense energy. But there was no mistaking the pride in his eye as he surveyed the situation. "Looks like you've handled things well," Kakashi said, his tone casual. But the underlying approval was clear. Naruto grinned sheepishly, his posture relaxing slightly. "I told you I wasn't holding back. But they still have something up their sleeve." The pale-faced man, struggling to get back on his feet, narrowed his eyes in frustration. "This isn't over," he hissed. "The Akatsuki will return stronger. You've only seen the beginning of what we're capable of." "That's fine with me," Naruto said, his voice steely. "I'm ready for whatever you throw at me." Kakashi stepped forward, raising a hand. "We've got this under control. You've done your part, Naruto." "Yeah. We'll take it from here," Sakura added, her eyes fierce with determination. Sai, ever the quiet one, simply nodded, his eyes scanning the surroundings, ready for any more threats. The two Akatsuki members shared a glance. Then, with a last, furious look at Naruto, they vanished in a swirl of smoke, retreating into the night. But not before leaving behind a chilling message. "We'll be back. And next time, you won't be so lucky." Naruto stood tall, his chest heaving with the intensity of the battle. But his mind was clear. He had won this fight. But the war was far from over. "We'll be ready for you," Naruto muttered to himself, the words filled with resolve. He turned to his team, a determined smile on his face. "They'll learn," he said, his voice filled with unwavering confidence. "Konoha won't back down." Kakashi clapped him on the back. "Well said, Naruto. You've come a long way." Sakura smiled warmly. Her eyes filled with pride. "You really are something else." Sai nodded. "You've proven yourself, Naruto. But we still have a long road ahead." Naruto's smile grew wider. "I know. And I'm not going anywhere. We've got work to do." As the team regrouped, the weight of their victory, and the inevitable challenges ahead, settled on their shoulders. But together, they were ready for whatever the Akatsuki or anyone else would throw their way. For Naruto, this battle was just the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain. But he wasn't afraid. He had the strength of his village, his comrades, and his own resolve to guide him. And with that, Naruto was ready to face whatever challenges the future held. Because no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how daunting the odds, Naruto would always fight for what he believed in. And no one, could take that away from him. As the last remnants of the battle faded into the night, Naruto's mind remained sharp, focused on the looming challenges. The Akatsuki's retreat wasn't a victory. It was merely a pause before the storm. Their words echoed in his ears. "We'll be back." It was a promise. A threat that Naruto couldn't afford to ignore. Kakashi, noticing Naruto's serious demeanor, spoke up. "Naruto, you've done well. But you need to be careful. The Akatsuki might not show up the same way next time." Naruto nodded, though his eyes still burned with the determination of someone who had just tasted victory but knew the battle was far from over. "I know, Kakashi. I'll be ready. We all will be." Sakura, standing nearby, added, "You've come so far, Naruto. You were amazing out there. But remember, we need to keep improving too." Sai nodded. "The enemy is constantly evolving. If we're going to keep up, we need to continue training together." Naruto met their gazes, a wave of gratitude washing over him. His team, his friends, had always been there for him. They were more than just allies. They were his family. "I won't let you down," Naruto said, his voice filled with an unshakable resolve. "But there's something more we need to focus on. The Akatsuki's goals, they're bigger than we thought. They won't just be after me anymore. They'll be after everything I care about." The group nodded in unison, understanding the weight of Naruto's words. The battle had only revealed a fraction of the Akatsuki's plans, but that fraction was enough to make them realize how dangerous the organization truly was. Kakashi spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "It's time we start looking at the bigger picture. If the Akatsuki are going after the whole village, we need to be prepared for anything. I'll inform the Hokage about what happened. We should also increase security around the village and train new shinobi to stand against threats like these." Naruto looked around at his team, a deep sense of responsibility settling over him. "Right. I'll keep training. I can't stop now. Not when there's so much at stake." Sakura, sensing Naruto's inner turmoil, stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone, Naruto. We're all here for you. Remember? You've always had our backs. And now we've got yours." Naruto smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes fully. "Yeah, I know. But sometimes, I feel like I need to be more stronger. If I'm going to protect everyone, I can't afford to falter." Sai, ever perceptive, added, "The weight of leadership can be heavy, but you don't need to carry it all at once. One step at a time. You're not alone in this fight." Naruto's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the first light of dawn began to break. The quiet morning was a stark contrast to the battle they had just fought, but it was a reminder that life went on, and there was always more work to be done. "I won't let fear hold me back," Naruto said, his voice quieter now, but resolute. "I'll find a way to make sure we're all ready. If I have to push myself to my limits and beyond, I will." Kakashi placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, giving him a knowing look. "That's the Naruto we all know. But just remember, limits exist for a reason. Pushing too hard without control can be dangerous. For you and everyone else." Naruto nodded slowly. "I get it, Kakashi. I'll be careful. But I'm not stopping." As the team gathered their things and prepared to head back to the village, the weight of the situation settled on them all. They knew the Akatsuki wouldn't give up, and Naruto's new power, while formidable, was still a mystery in many ways. They would need to understand it, refine it, and learn to control it fully if they were going to stand a chance. The next few days passed in a blur of training and preparations. Naruto's schedule was intense. A mix of honing his abilities and strategizing with his friends. Kakashi and Sakura continued to help him refine his control over his newfound strength. Kakashi often pulled Naruto aside, helping him work on focusing his chakra, improving his stamina, and mastering the different techniques he had unlocked. The power that Naruto had awakened was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It wasn't just raw strength. It was a force that seemed to tap into something deeper, something primal. When he called upon it, it was like a floodgate had opened within him, releasing a torrent of energy. But that same power also carried a weight, an intensity that could easily spiral out of control. The more Naruto trained with Kakashi, the more he began to realize that the true challenge wasn't just defeating the Akatsuki. It was learning to balance his power with his heart. He had always been driven by his emotions, and while that had made him strong, it had also made him reckless at times. If he didn't learn to control his newfound abilities, there was a risk he might lose himself in the process. But Naruto was determined. He pushed through every challenge, every obstacle, and every moment of doubt. With every new breakthrough, he felt himself growing, not just as a shinobi, but as a person. One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Naruto stood alone on a hill overlooking the village, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the rooftops. His breath was steady, his body aching from the day's efforts, but his mind was clear. "You've come a long way, Naruto." Kakashi's voice broke through the silence, and Naruto turned to see his sensei approaching. "But there's still much to learn." Naruto smiled, his usual determination lighting up his features. "I know. But I'll get there. I won't stop until I'm strong enough to protect everyone. Until I'm ready for the next fight." Kakashi paused for a moment, looking thoughtful. "You're on the right path, Naruto. But remember, you don't have to do it all alone. Even the strongest warriors need allies." Naruto nodded. "I won't forget. I've got my team. I've got Konoha. And that's all the strength I need." The two stood there for a while in silence. The wind rustling through the trees. Naruto could feel it. Something had changed in him. It wasn't just the power or the training. It was the realization that, despite everything, he wasn't alone in this fight. And maybe, just maybe, that was the key to overcoming whatever the Akatsuki, or anyone else, would throw his way. As the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Naruto felt a deep sense of calm wash over him. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer afraid. He had his friends, his village, and his purpose. And no matter what came next, Naruto Uzumaki would never back down. "Let's do this," he whispered to the wind, a promise to himself and everyone he cared about. "I'll protect you all. No matter what." The days blurred together as Naruto's training intensified. He pushed himself to new limits, constantly seeking ways to refine the overwhelming power that had awakened within him. Kakashi's teachings were invaluable, but there was still a part of him that felt disconnected from the sheer magnitude of his abilities. He had never encountered power like this before. Garp's strength, his will, and his legacy, it was all part of him now, an integral force that could reshape the world. But with that power came the responsibility to use it wisely, something Naruto was still learning to navigate. Meanwhile, the Akatsuki's activities remained shrouded in mystery. They had retreated, but their intentions were far from clear. As much as Naruto wanted to focus on his training, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. The words of the Akatsuki lingered in his mind. "The war is just beginning." One evening, after another long day of training, Naruto found himself standing at the village gates, gazing out at the horizon. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the mountains. It was a peaceful sight, but beneath that tranquility, Naruto could feel the weight of what was to come. His village, his friends, his family, they were all at risk. He couldn't let his guard down. Kakashi approached, his usual calm demeanor in place, though there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "You've been at this for hours, Naruto. Don't you think it's time for a break?" Naruto turned, a small smile on his face. "I'm fine. I just can't shake the feeling that something's coming. The Akatsuki won't stay quiet forever." Kakashi paused, glancing toward the horizon as well. "I understand. But remember, it's not just about power. You've learned that, haven't you? Strength alone won't win the war. It's how you use that strength that will make the difference." Naruto nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. "I get it, Kakashi. I know that. But I have to be ready. I need to be strong enough to protect everyone." Kakashi's eyes softened, a rare moment of vulnerability showing through. "You don't have to carry the burden alone, Naruto. Your strength comes from more than just your power. It comes from your heart, from the bonds you've formed with others. That's what makes you special." Naruto looked at his sensei, realizing how much he had grown, not just as a shinobi, but as a person. His sense of responsibility had always been a driving force. But now, there was a deeper understanding behind it. The people he cared about weren't just the village or his friends. They were a part of him. And he was willing to fight for them with everything he had. "I won't forget," Naruto said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "I'll protect them all." The following week passed in much the same way, with Naruto focusing relentlessly on his training. Kakashi had introduced him to new ways of controlling his power, using chakra to enhance his physical movements without exhausting himself. He worked on refining his Rasengan, pushing himself to create variations that could be used in a variety of situations. But the raw power he had gained from Garp still lingered within him, always threatening to explode if he lost focus. It wasn't just physical training. Naruto had to come to terms with his mental state as well. The fear of losing control, of becoming something he didn't understand, gnawed at him. But every time he felt that uncertainty, he would think back to the words of his friends. Sakura's encouragement, Sai's quiet support, and Kakashi's unwavering belief in him. They were all the anchors that kept him grounded. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, the feeling that something dark was approaching continued to haunt him. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a premonition. Every fiber of his being screamed that the Akatsuki were closing in. And this time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. One day, during a routine patrol with Sakura and Sai, the village received news that an unusual group of shinobi had been spotted near the borders. It wasn't unusual for rogue ninjas to cross through. But these ones were different, familiar in a way that sent a chill down Naruto's spine. Kakashi called a meeting in the Hokage's office. Naruto, Sakura, Sai, and a few other trusted members of the village were gathered, all listening intently as Kakashi spoke. "I've received word from the border patrol," Kakashi began, his tone serious. "A group of shinobi has been spotted near the outskirts of the village. They're wearing cloaks similar to those of the Akatsuki." Naruto's heart skipped a beat. "The Akatsuki? Are they making their move already?" "Not yet," Kakashi said. "But we need to be prepared. They've been gathering information for some time now, and it's clear they have a plan in place. The next move is theirs. But we need to act first." Naruto clenched his fists. "We can't let them get away with this. If they're near the village, we have to stop them now." Sakura nodded. "We've trained for this. We can't let them harm the village." Sai, ever the strategist, added, "The element of surprise will be on their side. We need to stay vigilant and strike quickly if they're planning an attack." Kakashi looked at each of them with a calculating gaze. "Naruto, I want you to be ready for anything. Your strength is a powerful asset. But don't rely on it alone. Use your head, and don't rush in without thinking." Naruto nodded, the weight of his responsibility settling in once again. "I'll be ready. But I'm not letting them hurt anyone." The next day, Naruto and his team set out to investigate the border. The sun was beginning to set as they reached the area where the Akatsuki members had been spotted. The air felt thick with tension, as though the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. They moved carefully, scanning the area for any signs of the enemy. Naruto could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. His senses sharpened to their peak. His chakra was flowing freely, ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. He had learned to control his power. But there was still a part of him that feared what would happen if it got out of hand. After several hours of careful scouting, they found nothing. No sign of the Akatsuki. No trace of their presence. It was almost too quiet. Just as they were about to head back to the village, A massive explosion erupted in the distance, shaking the ground beneath them. Naruto's heart raced as he immediately sprang into action, leaping forward with his teammates right behind him. "Move out!" he shouted, his voice filled with urgency. The explosion had come from the direction of the village. The Akatsuki had struck. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted toward the source of the explosion, his mind focused on one thing: protecting his village. The shockwaves from the blast rippled through the air, pushing against him. But he pushed forward with everything he had. His legs moved faster than they ever had before, his chakra surging through his body like a tidal wave, fueling his every step. Sakura, Sai, and Kakashi were right behind him, their faces etched with determination. They had fought alongside him countless times before. But this felt different. The Akatsuki's presence was undeniable, and the intensity of their attack was unlike anything they had faced. As they neared the village's outskirts, the sky was filled with smoke and flames. The village was under siege. The sounds of destruction echoed in the distance. The shrill cry of metal against metal, the roar of fires consuming buildings, and the panicked shouts of villagers scrambling to flee or defend their homes. Naruto's stomach twisted in anger. The Akatsuki had crossed a line. "We can't waste any more time," Naruto shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. "We need to stop them before they cause more damage." Kakashi nodded, his expression serious. "Naruto, hold back a bit. We don't know who we're facing just yet." But Naruto wasn't listening. His instincts, sharpened by the power within him, were already telling him what he needed to do. Without another word, he pushed forward, charging into the chaos. The village gates loomed ahead, destroyed in a fiery blaze. Naruto could see shadows moving in the distance, figures darting in and out of the smoke, their movements swift and deliberate. He didn't need to see their faces to know who they were. "The Akatsuki," Sakura whispered, her eyes narrowing. "They've already made their move." Naruto's eyes burned with determination. He could feel the power of Garp deep within him, the massive energy that surged through his body, waiting to be unleashed. His hands tightened into fists, and for a moment, he felt the urge to let loose, to strike hard and fast without mercy. But then, he remembered Kakashi's words, his responsibility to think before acting. Naruto clenched his jaw and forced himself to focus. This wasn't just about raw power. It was about strategy, teamwork, and keeping his emotions in check. "We need to make sure the villagers are safe first," Naruto said, his tone steady but urgent. "Kakashi, Sakura, you get the villagers to safety. Sai and I will handle the Akatsuki." Without waiting for a response, Naruto dashed into the smoke, his senses heightened. He could feel the oppressive chakra of the Akatsuki members nearby. Their presence was suffocating, like a dark cloud hanging over the village. But he wasn't afraid. He pushed through the smoke, his eyes scanning the area. He saw figures standing tall in the distance, their silhouettes unmistakable. They were waiting for him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Naruto grinned, his teeth flashing in the firelight. "Finally, we meet face to face." The figures stepped out of the smoke, revealing themselves. The first was a tall, imposing figure with a long, dark cloak adorned with the signature red clouds of the Akatsuki. His face was covered with a mask, but his eyes glowed with a sense of cold calculation. It was none other than Deidara. Beside him stood another figure, shorter but no less menacing. He was clad in the same dark cloak, but his features were far more haunting: pale skin, dark eyes, and a strange, unsettling aura that seemed to pulse with dark energy. Naruto's mind instantly recognized him. It was Sasori. "So, this is where you've been hiding," Naruto said, his voice filled with a mix of anger and anticipation. "I don't know what you want, but you're not getting away with it." Deidara chuckled, his voice as unsettling as his presence. "You think you can stop us? You're just a little boy playing hero. The Akatsuki's plans are bigger than you can imagine." Sasori remained silent, his eyes fixed on Naruto with an unnerving gaze. Naruto could feel the intensity of the situation growing. But he didn't flinch. This was what he had been training for. This was his chance to prove himself. Naruto's chakra flared as he prepared to strike. He could feel the power of Garp thrumming through his body, urging him to take action, to obliterate these two with one swift blow. But he held back, forcing himself to keep control. He needed to be strategic. Sasori's mouth curled into a smirk. "You're quite the nuisance, Naruto Uzumaki. But we've dealt with pests like you before." Before Naruto could react, Sasori's hands moved in a blur, and several large, puppet-like structures burst from the ground, surrounding him on all sides. They were mechanical, deadly, and seemed to be controlled by strings that Sasori manipulated with ease. Deidara, meanwhile, raised his hand to the sky, forming a strange hand seal. "Art is an explosion," he yelled, and with that, a massive clay bird exploded from his hand, soaring high above Naruto's head. Naruto's eyes widened as the bird began to descend toward him, its mouth opening wide, revealing an enormous clay bomb. "This is bad," Naruto muttered under his breath. But he didn't panic. He knew what he had to do. In a single motion, Naruto activated his new power, his body surging with energy. The ground beneath his feet cracked as his chakra exploded outward, forming a powerful, protective aura around him. He was no longer the same Naruto who had once struggled to find his place. He was a force of nature, unstoppable when he put his mind to it. With a roar, Naruto slammed his fist into the ground, sending a shockwave through the earth that tore apart Sasori's puppets. The force was so powerful that the puppets shattered into pieces, their intricate mechanisms falling apart in the blink of an eye. Deidara's bird was close now, its massive bomb ready to detonate. But Naruto wasn't fazed. He raised his hand and focused all of his chakra into one concentrated point. "Rasengan!" Naruto shouted, and a swirling ball of chakra appeared in his hand. He thrust it forward, and with a burst of energy, the Rasengan collided with Deidara's bomb in midair. The explosion was deafening. But where Deidara had expected destruction, he saw something different. Naruto's Rasengan shattered the bomb before it could reach him, disintegrating the clay bird in a blinding flash of light. Deidara staggered back, his face contorted with disbelief. "What the hell?" Naruto stood tall, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You're gonna have to do better than that." Sasori's eyes narrowed, clearly seeing that Naruto was no ordinary shinobi. "Impressive, Naruto. But we've only just begun." Without warning, Sasori launched his remaining puppets at Naruto with terrifying speed. But Naruto was ready. With a sudden burst of speed, he dodged each one, his body moving faster than Sasori's puppets could react. His senses were on fire. He could feel the battle shift in his favor, the power of Garp flowing through him, guiding his every move. It wasn't just strength, it was wisdom, battle instinct, the ability to read his enemies and strike where it hurt the most. As the battle raged on, Naruto realized that this was no longer just a fight. This was a test of his resolve, his strength, and his ability to protect everything he held dear. And he wasn't going to fail. The intensity of the battle raged on. The air was thick with dust and the acrid scent of smoke as Naruto's eyes locked onto Sasori and Deidara. The two Akatsuki members were powerful, but Naruto could feel his own strength surging through him with each passing moment. It was as though Garp's immense power was coursing through his veins, pushing him to new limits with every move he made. Deidara gritted his teeth, anger flashing in his eyes as he wiped the sweat from his brow. You're no ordinary brat, are you?" His hands began to form more intricate seals, his mind working furiously as he prepared his next assault. Naruto smirked. "I told you. This isn't just about being some little hero. It's about protecting my people, my village. And you're in my way." The ground beneath Naruto cracked as he leapt into the air, his feet leaving the earth with explosive force. With his training and Garp's power behind him, his agility had improved drastically. Every movement felt precise, fluid, an unstoppable force in motion. "Too slow," Naruto muttered, watching as Sasori's remaining puppets tried to encircle him. With one swift motion, he released another Rasengan, this time in the form of a massive, spiraling blast of chakra. It erupted from his palm with such force that the surrounding area shook, shattering Sasori's puppets into pieces before they even had a chance to approach. Sasori cursed under his breath, his expression hardening. "You're much more troublesome than I thought." kid." But there was no fear in his voice. Only a growing sense of annoyance and irritation. Deidara was the first to act, launching another wave of deadly clay creatures into the air. This time, however, Naruto wasn't as quick to react. He was still focused on Sasori, and Deidara saw his opening. With a wicked smile, the explosive artist threw a series of small clay bombs toward Naruto, each one designed to detonate on impact. Before they could hit, Naruto's senses flared to life. He turned sharply, his body moving with a fluid grace as he dodged the first bomb. The second came closer. But this time, Naruto did something unexpected. He didn't dodge it. He caught it mid-air, his hand gripping the clay bomb with an iron fist. "Rasengan!" Naruto shouted, and with the precision of a master, he slammed the sphere of swirling chakra into the bomb. The explosion that followed was devastating. A massive shockwave tore through the air, the force of the blast pushing back Naruto and the Akatsuki members. The smoke and dust clouded their vision. But Naruto stood tall, his silhouette emerging from the haze. His clothing was singed, his hair tousled, but there was a fire in his eyes that hadn't dimmed. Deidara stood at a distance, fuming. "This brat," he hissed under his breath. "You're more trouble than you're worth." Sasori, however, remained eerily calm, watching as Naruto continued to recover from the blast with astonishing speed. "Impressive," he said with a tilt of his head. "But let's see how you fare against this." Without warning, Sasori extended his hand, and the remaining puppets around him shifted. But this time, it wasn't just a few small constructs. It was the Sandaime cage, a towering puppet that Sasori controlled with deadly precision. Naruto's eyes narrowed. "I've heard about you," he said, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "The puppet master who controls the cage's body. You think this is going to stop me?" Sasori's puppet, the Sandaime cage, towered above them, its movements deliberate and cold. The puppet's fingers began to curl, and Naruto saw the glint of metal. Poisonous needles shot toward him with blinding speed. Naruto's reaction was instantaneous. He flared his chakra to full capacity, surrounding himself with a protective aura that deflected the needles. He followed up with a counterattack, launching himself toward Sasori's puppet with the speed of a lightning bolt. His Rasengan whirled in his hand as he prepared to strike. Sasori's eyes gleamed with cold calculation. He moved the cage puppet's hand just in time, blocking Naruto's Rasengan with a metal shield embedded in the puppet's arm. The impact sent a shockwave through the battlefield, shaking the earth beneath them. Deidara, not wanting to lose the upper hand, released more explosive clay creatures, sending them hurtling toward Naruto, who was now locked in a fierce struggle with Sasori's puppet. But Naruto was no longer just reacting. He was in control. He could feel the power of Garp pulsing within him, guiding his movements with an unshakable confidence. With a roar, he spun around, dodging the incoming clay bombs with ease. His chakra flared around him, creating a protective shield that sent the bombs spiraling into the air before they exploded harmlessly. Sasori's puppet, the Sandaime cage, reached down with one of its massive arms, trying to grab Naruto. But Naruto was faster. In a flash, he leapt upward, using his chakra to propel himself high into the sky, narrowly avoiding the puppet's grasp. The moment he was in the air, Naruto formed another Rasengan. His chakra roared as the sphere of energy grew in his hand, pulsing with raw, uncontrollable power. He could feel the weight of his strength. And for a brief moment, the world around him seemed to slow as he aimed the attack at Sasori's puppet. "Rasengan barrage!" he yelled, and with a single, powerful thrust, he launched the swirling ball of chakra directly at the Sandaime cage puppet. The explosion was cataclysmic. The force of Naruto's attack obliterated the puppet's arm, sending it crashing to the ground in a mangled heap of broken wood and metal. The remaining puppets scattered in all directions, and Sasori was forced to retreat, his expression darkening with frustration. Deidara, still hovering in the background, scowled. "I'm getting tired of this brat," he muttered. "It's time to end this." Without hesitation, Deidara launched a barrage of clay bombs into the sky, forming a massive bird made of explosive clay. The bird was even larger than before, and it dove straight toward Naruto, its mouth opening wide to unleash a devastating explosion. Naruto's eyes locked onto the bird, his chakra flaring as he readied himself. He could feel the impending danger, but he didn't falter. With a deep breath, he channeled all of his energy into one final strike. "I'll finish this now," Naruto shouted, his voice filled with determination. In a blur of motion, he jumped into the air, his Rasengan glowing brighter than ever before. The massive clay bird hurtled toward him, its mouth wide open, ready to devour him in a sea of destruction. But Naruto was faster. With the force of Garp's power fueling him, he thrust his Rasengan forward, smashing it directly into the bird's head just as it was about to reach him. The explosion that followed was unlike any other. The entire sky seemed to light up as the blast from the clay bird collided with Naruto's Rasengan. The force of the explosion sent a shockwave through the entire battlefield, shaking the ground beneath their feet. For a moment, everything was engulfed in blinding light. When the smoke cleared, Naruto stood at the center of the battlefield, breathing heavily, his clothes torn and singed, but his spirit unbroken. Deidara and Sasori lay on the ground, defeated, their plans shattered by the sheer force of Naruto's power. He could feel the presence of his teammates approaching, and as they stepped into view, Naruto allowed himself a moment of respite. "We did it," he said, a grin tugging at his lips, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The Akatsuki won't be causing trouble for a while. But deep inside, Naruto knew this was only the beginning. The Akatsuki were still out there, and their true plans had yet to be revealed. This battle had been won. But the war was far from over. As the smoke began to clear, Naruto stood tall, his chest heaving with exertion. His body ached from the intensity of the battle, but the adrenaline was still coursing through his veins, keeping him alert. The sounds of distant cries and explosions echoed in the background, reminding him that the village was still under siege. The victory against Deidara and Sasori had been significant, but it was only one part of a much larger war. His team was catching up. Sakura, Sai, and Kakashi arrived at his side, their expressions a mix of concern and admiration. Kakashi's eye narrowed as he took in the sight of Naruto, his clothes torn and covered in dust and soot. Despite the damage, the young man was standing proud, unwavering in the face of what was still to come. "Naruto," Kakashi began, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. "You did well. But we're not out of danger yet. The Akatsuki aren't ones to give up easily." Naruto nodded, his expression hardening as he scanned the battlefield. His eyes flicked over to the destroyed forms of Deidara and Sasori, their bodies still smoldering from the impact of his Rasengan. He could feel the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "I know," Naruto said quietly. "But we can't let them keep hurting the village. We need to take the fight to them." Kakashi glanced at Naruto with an understanding look. He could see the determination in the boy's eyes, the same fire that had burned within him since their first meeting. But now, there was something different. The immense power that Naruto had unlocked with Garp's influence was undeniable. He had grown far beyond the limits he had once been confined to. But that power came with a cost, both in terms of responsibility and control. Sakura, always the most concerned for Naruto's well-being, stepped forward. "You pushed yourself hard, Naruto. You're exhausted. Let us handle the rest." Naruto's eyes softened as he looked at his friends, his teammates. He could see the concern in their faces, but he knew that they couldn't do it alone. Not this time. The Akatsuki were too strong, and Naruto had the power to stop them. He couldn't afford to hold back. "We'll handle it together," Naruto said firmly, his voice resolute. "But I won't sit back and let you do all the work." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled again. A low, rumbling tremor that sent a chill down Naruto's spine. His senses went on high alert as the air around them grew colder, thicker with an unsettling energy. Something was coming, and it wasn't good. Kakashi narrowed his eyes, scanning the surroundings. "Something's not right," he muttered, his tone cautious. The ground shook again, this time more violently, and from the distance, a shadow emerged, dark and foreboding. It was large, imposing, and exuded an aura of immense power, something far beyond what they had just fought. "Is that Sai started, his voice trailing off as he tried to comprehend what he was seeing. Naruto's heart skipped a beat. That's him. It's Pain. Standing tall in the distance. His form was cloaked in shadows. But there was no mistaking it. The leader of the Akatsuki, the one who had been behind the destruction of the Hidden Leaf Village, was now here, staring them down with a gaze full of malevolence. The figure of Pain, who had the power to control the 6 paths of pain, each body a vessel for his godlike abilities, loomed large on the battlefield. With each step, the earth trembled beneath him. His appearance was striking, his eyes glowing a cold, blue hue, his face a mask of cold calculation. Naruto's pulse quickened, the fire of battle burning once again within him. He could feel the power inside him, the force that Garp had given him, ready to be unleashed. But he also knew that this wasn't a fight he could win alone. Pain was no ordinary foe, and the 6 paths of pain had devastated entire villages. Kakashi's voice was calm, but the gravity of the situation was evident. Naruto, this is it. This is the real fight. You'll need to control your power, or we won't stand a chance. Naruto nodded, clenching his fists. I know. I won't lose control. Not this time. Pain's voice echoed across the battlefield, deep and booming, like the voice of a god. So, you are the one who defeated Deidara and Sasori, he said, his tone both mocking and cold. Impressive. But you will not be so fortunate against me. Naruto's eyes flashed with determination. I don't care who you are. You hurt my village. And now you're going to pay. With that, he shot forward, his body moving faster than ever before. The power of Garp surged through him, pushing him beyond the limits of normal shinobi speed. He was more than just a ninja now. He was a force of nature, moving at lightning speed, his chakra wrapping around him like a shield. Pain raised his hand, and instantly, the 6 paths of pain moved into formation. The first of the 6 bodies, a towering, muscular figure, stepped forward, its eyes glowing a deep red. The Diva Path, responsible for controlling gravity, floated above the ground, ready to attack. Naruto didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, forming another Rasengan in his hand. But as he did, the Diva Path snapped its fingers, sending a powerful wave of gravity toward Naruto. The force was enough to make the ground crack and bend, pulling Naruto toward it with an intense force. Naruto gritted his teeth and fought against the pull, his feet digging into the earth. The gravity weighed heavily on him, but he wasn't going to give up. He focused on his chakra, expanding it outward in a pulse that pushed against the gravity, forcing his body to remain grounded. Shinra Tensei, Pain's voice rang out, and a massive shockwave blasted toward Naruto, sending everything in its path flying. Trees, rocks, and debris were all ripped from the earth as if they were weightless, hurtling away in every direction. Naruto gritted his teeth and slammed his Rasengan into the shockwave, using it to create a barrier that absorbed the force of the blast. The explosion shook the ground beneath him, but Naruto held firm, his feet planted in the dirt. Pain's 6 bodies advanced on him, each one with its own devastating power. One of them, the Asura Path, opened up its chest, revealing a set of mechanical weapons that fired at Naruto with terrifying speed. But Naruto wasn't fazed. With a burst of speed, he darted toward the Asura Path, his Rasengan crackling in his hand. As he closed the distance, he leapt into the air and slammed the Rasengan directly into the Asura Path's chest, obliterating the mechanical body in a flash of light. But before he could land, the animal path summoned a massive Cerberus, a giant, 3-headed dog that barreled toward him with immense force. Naruto didn't hesitate. With another burst of chakra, he powered through the Cerberus, his Rasengan destroying the beast in a split second. But as the smoke cleared, he saw the remaining paths of pain closing in. This was far from over. Pain's voice boomed again. You've done well. But this is only the beginning. Naruto's eyes burned with determination. This was the fight that would define him. No matter how powerful Pain was, he wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. And so, the battle continued. A clash of gods and heroes, where the fate of the village hung in the balance.